Welcome, welcome. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. It's going to be a great late night conversation. I'm so glad to be back within DC for work, and now I am back in New York City for a few days. It looks like, and then I'll be on the road once again. Wow, exciting times to be alive.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to be here with all of you. I really couldn't be happier to be here with all of you tonight. A lot of exciting things are happening. A lot of very, very exciting things are happening. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We are on Rumble, we are on Rockfin, and we are on YouTube. YouTube has been suppressing us lately. So we are making a point of drifting toward other platforms, but we will not give up our spot on YouTube. No, 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 no. We will hold on to our place on YouTube as long as we possibly can. But we understand that YouTube is messing with us because what they're doing with the subscriber count does not make any sense. Does not make any sense, but we continue. And that's why I encourage you to get on the Rumble or the Rockfin. But we continue. We continue despite their suppression. The social media outlets are rigged, but we continue. Right? Oh, wow. Look at that. We got a couple super chats already, and I was just getting to that. In the second half of our show, and you both are on the list. Very good. In the second half of our show, we are, having super chat questions. That's the way we generally do things. I give opening remarks, which is what I do at the beginning of the show. It starts pretty soon. Then we do a roll call to find out who is watching, names and locations. And that is always very, very exciting to see who it is on the other side of the camera, who's watching the show. That is always very, very exciting. And then from there, I answer questions for the rest of the night. And Rumble rants are first, and we already have one from Delta V. He already asked one, so that'll be first. Then we do the Rockfin tips, and then super chats on YouTube. So because of that, keep the questions rolling in. They'll all be added to the list, and then I will one by one answer them in the second half of our program. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of our program, send me a Rumble rant, super chat on YouTube, Rockfin tip. All forms of super chats are accepted. All forms of questions are accepted. So it is greatly appreciated. Greatly appreciated when people ask questions because it gets me talking. And it's the second half of our show that really makes the show, right? The opening is just me talking about what I think is important. But when you guys ask me questions and you get me talking and I'm reacting to you all and I'm looking at the chat, throughout. I see we have another Rumble rant just came in, right? So I'm looking at the chat. On the Rumble, on the YouTube, and on the Rockfin throughout the show. I'm reacting. This is a group collective operation here. This isn't just me sitting in front of my camera, right? If I just wanted to do this and upload it afterwards and just talking to my camera for a couple hours, I could do that. That's not what we're doing here. This is a group experience. We have our inside jokes. Of course, David Fox is talking about unnamed beverage, right? And we have our inside jokes, we have our ups, we have our downs, we have our recurring themes, we have our disagreements. Not everyone in this community necessarily agrees on everything, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. We have something special, and I really appreciate all of you being a part of my life as often as I come on here. And I also really appreciate you making me a part of your life every night. And we have a special relationship. We really do. Because the way we're able to dig into these issues and come at them from different angles, we don't just talk about politics here. We talk about history. We talk about spirituality. We talk about psychology. We talk about economics. We talk about philosophy. What we do here is really, really special. So I really want to give you all a big thank you from the bottom of my heart for being part of this community, for helping build this community, for maintaining this community, for surviving. We are marching ahead. And so that brings me to a couple big announcements. Well, not big announcements. I mean, there are things that you already know about, but just going to remind you, there are community announcements for the Center for Political Innovation, which is the organization that was formed as a result of the community that was built around these live streams. National convention is coming up. Mark your calendar. Make plans to be there December 2nd in Portland, Oregon. It is going to be awesome. It looks like I'm headed to Portland this weekend for a film screening. Details about that to be announced, but everything, it's not 100% confirmed, but it looks like I'll be on a plane to Portland in like 48 hours, and I'll be in Portland for a few days. Not yet 100% confirmed, but December 2nd in Portland, we are having our national convention. A beautiful, beautiful venue has been reserved for the convention. We've got a number of guest speakers that are talking about being there. Nick Brana, leaders of the Libertarian Party, Rainer Shea, Chris Halali of the Party of Communists. It is going to be a dynamic indoor rally. The room holds 250 people. We will fill that room. We are having buses providing transportation from Seattle. We are providing transportation from Northern California. We are providing transportation locally in Portland. We will fill the venue on December 2nd. It is going to be a 250-person indoor, all-day anti-imperialist mega rally. That's what we're calling it. It is going to be a session that will give birth to a new energy in the anti-war movement, an all-day session that will give birth to a new energy for socialism and anti-imperialism and solidarity with the people of the world. If you have ever been to a CPI conference, you know what I'm talking about. You know about the rally high that everyone gets, that glow, that energy, that hope, that optimism. People feel so invigorated and excited by our events. So you really don't want to miss it. And you got plenty of time to make plans. You got plenty of time to request off from work. You got plenty of time to book your flight, book your train ticket, make arrangements to get on the bus and be there. You got plenty of time. It's going to be awesome. It is going to be awesome. Now, the weekend afterwards, we're going to have a workshop in Portland for anyone who wants to come. There's going to be, some other stuff that happens, like the following day, we're planning an event, and I mean, it's going to be, early December in Portland is going to be the place to be. CPI is going to be doing a lot in early December because it needs to be done. This country desperately needs a real anti-imperialist movement, a movement about love and construction, not degrowth and pessimism. What we have to offer is desperately needed by this country and by the world. And so we are so excited to provide it. And, I'll be getting to that, Brandong. I'll be getting to that. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. But anyway, so then the other thing I wanted to quickly remind everybody is, for those of you who may not be aware, every morning on the CPI YouTube channel, every single morning, we have a morning message. A morning message from a member of the CPI, usually not me. I've done like 3 of them so far, but we're up to 56 of them. I've done like 3. Most of them don't come from me. They come from other members of our organization who want to give hope and optimism to the group, want to inspire the group and share something with the group. Every single morning on the CPI YouTube channel, another member of our community gets on there and gives the morning message. And it's beautiful what we have done so far. And it's a way to stay plugged into the community. So this is our call. If you are wanting to be plugged in, I encourage you to start your day every single day with revolutionary hope and optimism on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. CPI USA, the YouTube channel at CPI USA is the name of the YouTube channel. Oh my goodness, John, you're great. This is great. You know, there we go. And you're on the list, John, and that is astronomical. John is on board for building this group. And if you're up for it, make a morning message. Make one, right? Last week was a great week for CPI. 5 new members joined last week. 5 new members in a week. It was great. It was great. We have a new member in California. We got a new member in New York. We got a new member in different parts of the country. It's really, really great. Michigan. It's really, really great. We got new members coming into the organization. And we're all leading up to the big convention that'll be happening December 2nd. So mark your calendar. And if you want to stay plugged in, listen to the morning messages. Listen to the morning messages. And happy birthday, John, by the way. Listen to the morning messages and make a morning message. If you're a CPI member or a CPI friend and you would like to make a contribution to what we do here at CPI, record a morning message and send it to me. My email is calebmaupin@gmail.com. If you would like to make a contribution, record a morning message yourself, make one, because we need morning messages. This community is about lifting each other up, holding each other up, building the kind of solidarity that's needed. So record a morning message if you're up for it. So those are a couple things I wanted to share. Another quick announcement. I just got, finally, it took me a while, but I did finally get my own copies of Letter to Bob Avakian, my new book, which is an assessment and critique of the leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party. Letter to Bob Avakian. That is our book, beautifully designed. The cover by Elizabeth Young, beautifully laid out by Kyle, who did a great job with the layout, with the pictures and everything. It's just really, really great. We got in here. What do we got in here? We got a very, very famous photograph, right? We won't fight a rich man's war. Vietnam veterans, 1976, the Revolutionary Communist Party organized a large protest to counter the bicentennial. This is my new book. And I wanted to give you all an update on how the sales are going, because this is important. This is important, right? These kind of things matter, right? People say they don't matter, but they do. They are wrong when they say they don't matter. This is important. So I'm going to share this all with you, right? Amazon rates every book that is published on Amazon. Right? Did you notice they do an official rating of every book, which is, there's millions and millions of books published on Amazon, but they rate them all. They rate them all. And they have different categories of books, and this book was in the category of socialism or communism and socialism, which is their category, right? They have different categories, right? And in every category, they have the top new releases. And I want to let you know that we made the top 20 in socialism and communism. Communism and socialism, we were number 16. Can you believe it? In communism and socialism new releases, Letter to Bob Avakian was number 16. Can you believe this? I mean, who would have thought that? I didn't expect this book would be a big seller. You know what I mean? I knew what, BreadTube Serves Imperialism was number one, the number one new release in the category of anarchism for 3 weeks. That didn't surprise me, because all of the BreadTubers were losing their minds over it and promoting it like crazy. But this is great. In all the books that are published, they got Sister North Korea and Dark Future, some Glenn Beck anti-communist book, and degrowth shit and all of that. But in the category of communism and socialism, Letter to Bob Avakian, this book I have in my hand, was ranked as number 16. That is beyond my expectations. I did not think that this would get on any lists on Amazon. I did not believe that Letter to Bob Avakian. I figured it was an obscure topic. I wrote it because I wanted anyone who looked up Bob Avakian to get my assessment and to get my assessment of his views and my critique of his views. And I wrote it for academic and political reasons. I did not expect it to be selling so well. But look at that. Look at that, right? We became number 16 in this category of socialism and communism, which, do you know how many books there are about socialism and communism these days? I mean, we're not that far behind the sister, North Korea's KIT, right? We're not that far behind Dark Future, Uncovering the Great Reset by Glenn Beck, right? You know, that's big, right? You're on the list. You're on the list, Battle Cossack. You're on the list. That's big. That means that, you know, and I look at the sales numbers that have come in, they've been decent. They have been decent. People are buying this book. So I wanted to let you all know about that. I was delighted, and I would encourage you, if you haven't read it yet, go and read Letter to Bob Avakian. You know, I've gotten good reactions so far from everyone who's read it. You know, there's historic photographs. Here we got, you know, when the RCP protested Deng Xiaoping, death to Deng Xiaoping. I talk about that. You know, I got a lot of nice graphics in here. You know, this is, you know, the famous, what do we got here? Victory to the Viet Cong. Communists seek to align the working class of the imperialist homelands with the colonized people of the world fighting for national liberation. You know, you know, I mean, you know, I mean, we have a lot of great graphics. The layout guy did a great job. He did a great job. I gave him, he just did a tremendous job. Shout out to you, Kyle, if you're watching. He just did a tremendous job, and it's really, really great. It's really, really, really great. So I hope that you will enjoy it. Ian Foster just read it. He said, just finished reading it. Enjoyable and an education. Great stuff, Caleb. I teach people with my books, right? My books are about teaching people information, and I'm glad you liked it, Ian. So I just wanted to get those 3 announcements out of the way. Those are our 3 announcements that we just wanted to start the show with. So as I mentioned before, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. I'm now going to go into my opening remarks. I'm going to start making my opening remarks, but the super chat questions are rolling in. I will answer those in the second half of the program. All right, let's do it. So, what is today? Well, today is 9/11. Today is September 11th. And in leftist circles, it's often pointed out that there are 2 horrendous events in recent history that happened on September 11th. The most recent being September 11th, 2001, when the World Trade Center was hit by 2 airplanes. The Pentagon was hit by an airplane, and thousands of people, almost 3,000 people, lost their lives. And the second was September 11th, 1973, when the Chilean government was violently overthrown by the military with the support of the United States, and thousands of leftists and communists and socialists and innocent civilians were rounded up and killed and tortured or shot down in the streets, and it was a pretty horrendous event. Now, both of those events are important to talk about. But I want to remind you all, I'm going to talk about both of those events. Both of them. And I'm going to show you why what we do on these broadcasts is so important. Because for both of those events, there is a standard leftist understanding, which is true, but is just scratching the surface. And for both of those events, I can provide you with a much deeper analysis. Because if all it took was the standard surface level interpretation of both of these events, if that standard leftist answer to both of these events that standard leftist analysis, the Noam Chomsky, Howard Zinn, Abby Martin, Brian Becker analysis of these events, if that standard leftist analysis of these events would suffice, we would be living in a much better society right now. The left and the socialist and communist groups would be leading millions of people, and we'd be on the road to socialism, but we are not. And so that indicates, you're on the list, that indicates that we need a deeper understanding. With 9/11, the standard leftist interpretation of 9/11 is true. It's that the United States has gone all over the world, overthrowing governments, bombing people, just murdering people, and somebody turned around and did that to the United States. That is 100% true. Now, it used to be that in leftist circles, you'd also get people who said that the military-industrial complex may have known that 9/11 was going to happen or allowed it to happen, etc., for political reasons. Now, you don't hear that so much in leftist circles anymore because it's been sent out that conspiracy theories are right-wing. So you're not allowed to question things like that. I think there's a lot of holes in the official story of 9/11. I'm not going to tell you who did it. I'm not going to say the military-industrial complex did it or Israel did it. I'm not going to say that. Because I don't know that. I do know that there's things about the official story of 9/11 that seem a little odd, like where was NORAD, and how closely planes are tracked in the sky. We're led to believe that there were 4 different planes that went on. I mean, there's a lot of questions about 9/11. Questions are fine, but when you start saying what actually happened and you don't know, you're in dangerous territory. And I don't know what actually happened on 9/11. I do know there's new questions from Gray Zone about the background of the hijackers and their ties to the CIA, and there's that. And I know that there's questions about, there's all kinds of questions about all kinds of things. But we don't know what actually happened. We just know that the official story of 9/11, it's hard to buy. And we have the 28 pages now. People ask questions about Building 7. There's a lot of questions that are there. The official story of 9/11, there's a lot of holes in it. That's all we know. But regardless, you're not even allowed to say that in leftist circles anymore. With 9/11, that first narrative that I just laid out to you was everywhere. That first one, that America has killed so many people around the world, and that this is just somebody striking back. I wouldn't say it was everywhere. Most of the country after 9/11 got whipped up into a crazed, deranged, pro-military, pro-war frenzy. And it was very frightening. It was very, very frightening. I was a kid. I was in 8th grade when 9/11 happened, and my little hometown, we were miles away from New York City, and my little hometown turned into like a 24/7 military parade practically. For months, for almost a year after 9/11, there was a TV in every classroom showing CNN or showing Fox, and it was just, we were constantly having to do stuff, make candy bags to send to the troops. And, we had teachers who were giving us, ranting about the fact that, Muslims, they don't believe in the Bible. That's why they did 9/11. The 10 Commandments say don't kill, but they're not Christians. And, it was Islamophobia like crazy. My family, we had hosted a student from Pakistan, and I knew what a Muslim was because we'd hosted this student from Pakistan. And I remember just the fact that, that that I said, well, I've met a Muslim before. My family's hosted a student from Pakistan. People in my town are like, oh my God, a Muslim? Oh my God, maybe Caleb's involved in 9/11. That's how small-minded and bigoted people can be sometimes. But, after 9/11, my little town turned into a 24/7 militaristic, rally practically. And the country was whipped up into a very scary state of jingoism and militarism. You're on the list. It was very scary after 9/11, and I was certainly uncomfortable with how things were. But the response of the left to 9/11, the response of Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn, and the response of Ward Churchill and others was to say, the United States has killed all these people around the world. That is true. Now someone has attacked the United States. True. That is technically true. There's nothing false in that. The USA killed millions of people in Vietnam. The USA killed millions of people in Korea. The USA bombed and starved Iraq and killed hundreds of thousands of people, and eventually invaded, used 9/11 as a pretext to invade. That was later, but, they had already bombed Iraq a bunch of times and starved people in Iraq, and that it's true. That narrative is true. And that was the response that leftists gave, and that was, in terms of public relations, one of the greatest blunders. The greatest blunders I have ever seen. The American socialists and communists were going out of their way to make themselves unpopular and to say the opposite. And this is important. The opposite of what the global communist movement was saying, what all the anti-imperialist countries were saying. After 9/11, Gaddafi, whose country had been bombed by the United States, who'd been subject to sanctions by the United States, whose daughter had been murdered by the United States, what did Gaddafi say after 9/11? Did he say, oh, this is the great Satan America getting what it deserves? No. Gaddafi said, wow, Al-Qaeda attacked America. I've been fighting Al-Qaeda for years. Maybe this is a chance for America and Libya to get along. Gaddafi even offered to torture people to help America catch Osama bin Laden. Cuba, that's a country that's been subject to horrendous sanctions, by the United States, crippling embargoes, attempted invasions at the Bay of Pigs. What did Cuba say after 9/11? Did Cuba say, oh, America gets what it deserves? No. Cuba offered to send doctors. Did you know this? Cuba offered to send doctors to New York City after 9/11. And they said that Osama bin Laden and these jihadist, Wahhabi extremists, they're awful people. And if America wants to cooperate with Cuba to fight against them, let's do it. Syria, Ba'athist Arab socialist country. What did they say after 9/11? They said, we will support a war on terror, and we've been fighting these people for years, the Muslim Brotherhood and the Wahhabi fanatics from Saudi Arabia. We will help torture people. They even volunteered to help torture people. They said, we want to team up with America to fight these people. That's what Iraq said. All over the world, all the anti-imperialist countries, their response to 9/11 was, yeah, wow, you just found out what these people you've been arming and training all over the world are doing. You've been training terrorists and extremists and sicking them on our countries. And they kill people and they do awful things. And now so now maybe you can work with us to defeat them. That was what all the anti-imperialist countries said. That's what Russia said. Russia said, we've been dealing with these people in Chechnya for years. We've been dealing with these people in Afghanistan. And we've been dealing with these people for years. the whole anti-imperialist bloc was sympathetic to America after 9/11, and they said that this shows how dangerous Islamic extremists are, and the USA has been turning a blind eye to Saudi Arabia while it arms and props these people up. The USA, Brzezinski, has been arming these people and supporting them all over the world. And all the anti-imperialist countries said that they wanted to team up with America to defeat al-Qaeda. That was their position. The American people who wanted to kick bin Laden's ass and wanted to fight al-Qaeda, and Libya and Iraq and China and North Korea and Cuba were on the same page. They were on the same page for once. This is the message. I can show you the statements. All the anti-imperialist leaders were excited. They said, this is an opportunity. They understood how to play the game. They knew that the United States, after 9/11, would have to take some action against al-Qaeda. And so they knew that that would create an opening for them to improve relations with the United States by fighting against al-Qaeda. And so the socialist countries had the correct approach. The anti-imperialist states had the correct approach to dealing with 9/11. They had the correct approach, was just to say, we hate al-Qaeda, we hate bin Laden, we want to align and stand in solidarity with the American people who just got attacked. We want to fight these Wahhabi extremist people. That's what they said. But I want to show you what the U.S. left said. All right? Noam Chomsky said, oh, America is the big terrorist. Ward Churchill compared the victims in the Twin Towers to little Eichmanns and said that average Americans deserved to be killed because they weren't protesting against the U.S. government and the sanctions it imposed on Iraq, which is weird because Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. But Ward Churchill wrote this whole essay called Some People Push Back, basically saying that average Americans didn't care enough about the sanctions on Iraq and weren't protesting about it enough, so they deserved to die. And in his essay, he compared the victims in the Twin Towers to little Eichmanns, to Adolf Eichmann, who was the Nazi war criminal hung by Israel. And then this statement, this is one of the worst things, the worst examples. This is probably the worst example that I can find of a statement made in the aftermath of 9/11. This is from Yuri Kochiyama. Yuri Kochiyama was a Japanese-American activist who was a friend of Malcolm X and was very close to the Revolutionary Communist Party. She was a leader of Asian American communities in San Francisco. This is what Yuri Kochiyama said after 9/11, and we can forgive her. She was over 80 years old at the time, She was over 80 years old, and, to some degree or other, you have to think she just didn't know what the fuck she was saying. But somebody was handling her, and this was the atmosphere, and among the boomer left, the Ward Churchills, the Noam Chomskys, the Howard Zinns of the world, this is what they said. This is Yuri Kochiyama. This is what she said. She said, I'm glad that you are curious why I consider Osama bin Laden as one of the people that I admire. To me, he is in the category of Malcolm X, Che Guevara, Patrice Lumumba, Fidel Castro, and all leaders that I admire. They had much in common. Besides being strong leaders who brought consciousness to their people, they had a severe dislike for the U.S. government and those who held power in the U.S. Bill bin Laden may have come from a wealthy family, but at the time he was 20, he came to loathe the eliteness and class conduct of his family. Not true. You ask, should freedom fighters support him? Freedom fighters all over the world, not just in the Muslim world, don't just support him. They revere him and they join him in battle. This is bullshit. This is not true. Cuba didn't say this. Iraq didn't say this. North Korea didn't say this. Libya and Gaddafi didn't say this. This is unbelievable. The only people who said this The only people who made statements like that were the idiots who run the American communist groups. Brian Becker, Sarah Flounders, Bob Avakian, they all made statements like that. And it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. It's completely nuts. And of course, what did the American people do when they heard this, right? They were all afraid of being bombed and attacked. They saw the Twin Towers go down in smoke. Everyone was terrified of terror attacks and orange alerts. And so, of course, what did the American people do? They immediately joined the Revolutionary Communist Party. They immediately joined the Workers' World Party. They immediately joined the Answer Coalition, right? They immediately joined the Democrat Socialists of America. Of course they didn't join. The country had just been attacked. People were afraid for their lives. And the PR department of the American left said, our job is to say the terrorists who did this are good guys. Now, is it any shocker that the American people didn't listen to these people? Is it any shocker that the American people overwhelmingly supported the invasion of Afghanistan? It shouldn't be a shocker at all. Imagine you just got punched in the face. Imagine you were walking home from work and someone punched you in the face and robbed you. You came home to your spouse and you said to your spouse, I just got beaten up and robbed. And your spouse says, well, 10 years ago, you robbed somebody. And all kinds of people all over the world get robbed every day. So, you kind of deserve it. So, I mean, that robber is kind of a hero because you have more than him. Of course, you would say to your spouse, get the fuck out of my house. I just got robbed. No one wants to hear that. It was the worst message. And all the legit communists in the world, the communists in Vietnam didn't say that. The communists in Cuba didn't say that. The communists in North Korea didn't say it. The communists in China didn't say that. The communists in Laos didn't say it. None of the actual communists or anti-imperialists in the world talked that way after 9/11. Gaddafi didn't talk that way after 9/11. Saddam Hussein didn't talk that way after 9/11. None of the actual communists in the world talked that way after 9/11. But all the American communist groups got it in their heads that Osama bin Laden was some kind of great anti-imperialist, a third world revolutionary fighting against the American empire, which he was not. Osama bin Laden is from one of the wealthiest families in Saudi Arabia, and he was a proxy of the United States against the Soviet Union. He built an army of jihadists from around the world to go to Afghanistan to fight the Soviet Union with CIA guns and CIA money and money from drug cartels in Pakistan. He was a heroin dealer. Osama bin Laden was one of the wealthiest billionaires in the world, and he, due to his religious beliefs, decided to become a warlord billionaire. And he did the dirty work of America in Afghanistan. And he did the dirty work of America in Syria. He did the dirty work of America in Iraq. He fought against revolutionary Marxist governments around the world. And for reasons unbeknownst to us, because a lot still remains classified after 9/11, there's been great journalism. And you're on the list. Don't worry, you're on the list. There's been great journalism done by Gray Zone about the 9/11 hijackers and their ties to the CIA. And the 28 pages showed that some of them had relatives and family members at the Saudi embassy that were helping them. And, that is just horseshit. Osama bin Laden was not a third world revolutionary. Osama bin Laden was not an anti-imperialist. Osama bin Laden was the leader of a deranged pro-imperialist counter gang of fanatics that was used by the West to attack anti-imperialists. Show me one place where Osama bin Laden was actually fighting against the United States. Afghanistan, he was on America's side. In Iraq, when he fought against Saddam Hussein, he was on America's side. In Libya, when he fought against Gaddafi, he was on America's side. In Syria, when he fought against Assad, he was on America's side. All of Osama bin Laden's life, he was on the same side as the U.S. imperialists. He was on the same side as the Pentagon. He targeted the People's Democratic Republic of Afghanistan and the Soviet Union, just like the United States imperialists did, just like the Pentagon did. In Chechnya, he targeted the Soviet Union and Russia, just like the United States did. In Syria, he fought against Bashar Assad and the Syrian Arab Republic, just like the United States did. In Libya, he fought against Gaddafi, just like the United States did. He was on the same side as the United States. And then, for reasons that still aren't clear, he and his network brought down the World Trade Center, attacked the Pentagon. So, why did the American communists immediately announce that Osama bin Laden was, I mean, you saw the quote from Yuri Kochiyama. It was utterly horrendous what she said. This is, I mean, what Yuri Kochiyama said in the aftermath of 9/11. I mean, it's utterly horrendous, right? I mean, what she said, I showed you what she said, right? There's a part 2. She compared him to Malcolm X. She compared him to Fidel Castro. She compared him to Che Guevara and Patrice Lumumba. This is nuts. It's nuts. And all the genuine communists and anti-imperialists weren't saying that, but her statement didn't stop there. It continues. It continues. Oh, yes, she didn't stop there. Yuri Kochiyama continued her statement. She said, this is what she said. These are her actual words. You stated that some freedom fighters responded that bin Laden's agenda is more reactionary and does not speak to the needs of the masses of people who exist under U.S. dominance. Bin Laden has been primarily fighting U.S. dominance, even when he received money from the U.S. when he was in Afghanistan. He was fighting for Islam and all the people who believe in Islam against Westerners, especially the U.S., even when he was fighting the Russians. That's a fucking lie. That's just a lie. That's not true. There's not a single place in the world that Osama bin Laden was not on the side of U.S. imperialism. You're on the list. You're on the list, Dan. Not a single place. And the response of the American left to 9/11 was horrible. We basically told the American people they deserved it. That's what we did. We told the American people, you deserved it. And the guys who attacked you are great heroes. And none of that was true. And none of the communists around the world were saying anything close to that. But you know what's weird? What's weird about that? Right after 9/11, they immediately decided they were going to use 9/11 to invade a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. And what country was that? It was a revolutionary anti-imperialist country, Iraq. Iraq that had been armed and had an economic partnership with the Soviet Union, that had sent weapons and military support to the Palestinians. Iraq, Ba'athist Arab socialism, close ties to Cuba, close ties to North Korea. And the message of George W. Bush was that somehow Iraq was involved in 9/11, and that has been completely debunked. That was a lie. They claimed that because one of the hijackers had gone to the hospital once in Iraq, that proved Iraqi involvement in 9/11. They claimed, they made, it was outrageous. It was utterly ridiculous. There was no Iraqi government tie to Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda were Saudi Wahhabis, Islamic fundamentalists. Iraq was a secular Arab nationalist and socialist government aligned with Marxists. They were on opposite sides of the political spectrum. In the Middle East, there is a wide variety of viewpoints, right? But mainly in most Middle Eastern countries, there are two political currents that are at odds with each other. You tend to have nationalists, Arab nationalists, that tend to be tied in with the military and tend to be more historically anti-imperialist, friendly to the Soviet Union, etc. That's, you have Arab nationalists, and they tend to be backed by families that are close to the military, families that are close to the military wing of the government, etc. Arab nationalists. And then you have Islamists, and Islamists tend to be lower level capitalists that aren't in with the military, and Islamists, they don't emphasize Arab nationalism. Many Islamists are not Arabs. They tend to be Turkmen. They tend to be Kurds sometimes, but they emphasize religion, and they're not tied to the military, and they tend to be more pro-American and more free market. And this is the push and pull you get in most Middle Eastern countries. You have the Arab nationalist bourgeoisie that favors ties to the Soviet Union, that often is more secular, in favor of a secular government, emphasizes the Arab nationalism. And then you have the mercantile bourgeoisie that is oriented toward Islamism and is more free market, tends to be with the Muslim Brotherhood, rejects Arab nationalism because Islam is for anybody who converts. It's not just for the Arabs. Rejects Arab nationalism and favors pan-Islamism or Islamic trade, and is more free market oriented, etc. This is the push and pull. Saddam Hussein was about as far as you can get in the spectrum of Arab nationalism. He established an Arab nationalist government, Ba'athist Arab socialism, that was aligned with the United States. He was the leader of the military that took over Iraq and established and nationalized the economy, established Ba'athist Arab socialism. There were Christians in the Iraqi government. There were women who held government positions. His position was that if you're as long as you're an Arab, you're just as much a member of my country, no matter what your religion. Saddam Hussein was an extreme Arab nationalist, secularist, socialist. On the other hand, Osama bin Laden, a billionaire from Saudi Arabia, was an extreme Wahhabi who believed that they should copy the Islamic government of the Caliphate of the 1400s. They should go back to the government that existed in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, that rejected any notion of Arab nationalism, was 100% in favor of some kind of religious, fanatical government, supported the Saudi kingdom because he believed that monarchies were ordained by God to be the kind of government you should have. Osama bin Laden was the opposite end of Middle Eastern politics, right? You could not get too, it would be like, I'm trying to think of an example. It'd be like Martin Luther King Jr. and the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. Okay. I'm trying to think of another example. It would be like, Richard Dawkins and Jerry Falwell. These are two guys in Middle Eastern politics, in the politics of the Middle East and the Arab world, that could not be further apart. Osama bin Laden was diametrically opposed to everything that Saddam Hussein stood for, and vice versa. And Osama bin Laden had fought Saddam Hussein on the battlefield. He aligned with Iran during the Iraq-Iran War. Osama bin Laden's networks had carried out assassinations and bombings against the Iraqi government. Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden had nothing to do with each other. They were bloodthirsty enemies. But after 9/11, George W. Bush, the president of the United States, told us, well, they're the same. America's been attacked by terrorists, and those terrorists, Al-Qaeda, are tied in with Saddam Hussein. You see, I've got special intelligence that Iraq was involved in the 9/11 attacks, and that Osama bin Laden was tied to Saddam Hussein. And there's no logical reason that any of this could be true. I'm just making this up because I'm the president of the United States, and the American people are now traumatized by a horrendous attack that just happened. And because of that, because the American people are traumatized, see, I am going to try to manipulate them into supporting an invasion of a country that has nothing to do with it. In fact, my invasion is actually going to help people like Osama bin Laden by killing one of their enemies, Saddam Hussein. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was utterly unbelievable. But the left and George W. Bush agreed. The left and George W. Bush agreed with each other. The left said, oh, America's been attacked by anti-imperialists and revolutionaries. And George W. Bush said, there's an anti-imperialist revolutionary named Saddam Hussein. He's the one who did it. So we got to go invade Iraq. And the messaging was the same. That That is very suspicious. And especially if you point to what I told you before about how the communist governments of the world were not saying this. The communist governments of the world weren't saying this. So that is a deeper message. No one's going to talk this way about 9/11. No of the other communist podcasters are going to give you this insight. But I'm telling you that the message of the American communists after 9/11 should have been Osama bin Laden is bad, and now is the time to team up with Gaddafi to fight him. Now is the time to team up with Saddam Hussein to fight him. And, let's enter an alliance. Let's form an anti-terror alliance with Russia and China to fight al-Qaeda. That should have been the message. We should have hijacked the American people's anger about being attacked by Osama bin Laden, exposed the Saudi relationship and the ties and the anti-communism of bin Laden, gone out of our way to present Russia and China and Iraq and North Korea as friends of the United States to fight al-Qaeda. That's what we should have done. But instead, we did the opposite. We did what Yuri Kochiyama did, and we made it sound like we supported al-Qaeda. We made the American people feel like they deserved to be attacked. It was utterly horrendous. Utterly horrendous. And, that there is why the U.S. left, I maintain, is controlled. I maintain that the U.S. left is completely controlled. And that is an insight you will not get anywhere else, right? I can guarantee you Ben Norton, he ain't talking this way on his, on his streams. And I can guarantee you that, that none of the bread tubers are talking this way. I'm giving you an insight as somebody who was a participant in these movements and someone who has been to the anti-imperialist countries about how the American people how the so-called left got it wrong after 9/11. And that is an insight you will not get anywhere else. Now we'll move on to the earlier 9/11. September 11th, 1973, the government of Chile was overthrown. Salvador Allende had been the elected president, and he had nationalized a number of industries. He was in an alliance. He was the leader of the Socialist Party of Chile, and he was in an alliance with the Communist Party of Chile and with the Radical Party of Chile. And they had a coalition government. It was called the Popular Unity Government. The Popular Unity Government, the Popular Unity Coalition. And they ran the government in Chile. It was social democracy, and they were trying to peacefully transition towards socialism. We're trying to peacefully transition towards socialism. And the military, Augusto Pinochet was a military figure, violently overthrew the government, arrested and executed Salvador Allende, rounded up thousands, about 20,000 leftists and communists, and tortured them to death. And it's really, really a horrendous thing. And there's no way to gloss around that. I mean, it was just a horrendous event that happened. And what I find to be infuriating is that there are a lot of libertarians who like it. And I'm not exaggerating, right? There's a lot of libertarians who think that somehow this was good. Even though libertarians claim to believe in freedom, even though libertarians are supposed to be advocates of free speech, etc., there's a lot of libertarians that are just so seething in their hatred of communism that they think that what happened in Chile was great. They make helicopter memes about it. They joke about dropping communists out of helicopters, which supposedly was done by the Chilean coup plotters. I remember after the 2008-2009 financial crisis, there were a lot of libertarians who were saying America needs a Pinochet to privatize everything, because after the overthrow of the Chilean government in 1973. Usually, and this is the thing, and I'll get to this in a minute, but Chile was not the first time the U.S. government had overseen a coup that overthrew an elected leader, right? Indonesia, 1965. Sukarno was a socialist leader, and the CIA overthrew him, right? And installed a brutal dictator who, killed hundreds of thousands of people. And, Barack Obama was living there at the time. And his stepfather, Lolo Suharto, was a leader of the Indonesian military who was involved in it. And it turned into a genocide against ethnically Chinese people. And Guatemala, 1953, Jacobo Arbenz was an elected leader, and he was violently overthrown in Guatemala. And there's many, many, many examples of this happening. Many examples. What made Chile different? And this is important. What made Chile different was that usually what would happen is that a military junta would take power, and that military junta would do kind of what Park Chung-hee did in South Korea, or what the various military juntas in Argentina had done, is that they would use the military to create some industries, and they would take care of their friends. And the middle class of these countries would get wealthier because the military government would hand out contracts and hand out the loots, and the middle class would become loyal to the military government, and then they could effectively crush the labor unions and the working class and the peasantry. And that's usually what happened, is that they would, Park Chung-hee, he developed the cities in South Korea. He made a prosperous middle class in South Korea. Various military leaders, that's generally what they would do. The USA would bring them to power. The Shah of Iran is a great example. The Shah of Iran, he carried out the famous White Revolution, and he carried out economic development projects, and to stabilize the country as the military dictator, right? The USA overthrew Mossadegh in Iran, 1953. They had a coup. And then after that, you had the Shah. And what did the Shah do? The Shah redistributed land. He gave women the right to vote. And he created an airline. And he carried out some level of economic development to stabilize the country. What made Chile different is that they didn't let the military junta of Chile carry out economic development. Instead, they implemented neoliberal economics. Again, this is an insight you will not get from Ben Norton. You will not get from any of these so-called people on the internet. They're just like, oh, awful coup. It was awful. A lot of people died. Well, yeah, that's true. But a lot of people died in Indonesia. A lot of people died in Iran. A lot of people died in Guatemala. There's many, many countries where this has happened. But there was something unique about Chile. In Chile, they brought Milton Friedman, the Chicago school economist. They brought Milton Friedman into office. And Milton Friedman implemented radical free market policies that destroyed Chile's economy. Usually these military dictators would come into power and stabilize the economy. Not in Chile. In Chile, Pinochet was he basically got into power and he said, all right, wreck my country. 30% unemployment. Insane inflation. They immediately cut all the subsidies to food. Salvador Allende had implemented all kinds of food subsidies to lower the cost of food. All of that was lifted, right? So all the people who worked in government jobs immediately got fired and lost their jobs. And then all the food subsidies that made the price of food in Chile affordable went down, were gotten rid of. There was a mass crisis in Chile of malnutrition. People starved to death. Children were fainting in school because they did not have enough food. There were a lot of children who didn't have food, and the only food they were getting was the school milk program. They gave free milk to kids in school. So there were kids who were depending on the milk in school because that was the only way they could eat because their family was unemployed. They'd gotten rid of the food subsidies. So then Pinochet cut the food school milk program. And there was literal starvation all over Chile. There was a man-made famine. And the United Nations, this is so sick, and I dug this up. It's shocking to me. The United Nations sent people to Chile to study the impact of malnutrition on psychological development. And they did studies about, what happens if somebody is, if a child is eating, everything's fine until they're 4, and then all of a sudden they can't get food anymore. And they did all kinds of studies. The United Nations did all these studies about the impact of malnutrition on children's development. Now, there were children that never learned to walk because they didn't get food. And because they didn't get food, their brain did not develop the fine motor skills to walk, and they never learned to walk. There are thousands of people in Chile who lived, they didn't die from malnutrition, but because they were children, they were 1 or 2 years old in the aftermath of this ugly coup that was brought on by the United States, they are mentally retarded. They're mentally disabled because they were children. And immediately, Pinochet came in there and he just wrecked the economy of Chile. Boom, 30% unemployment. Can you imagine 30% unemployment, right? 10% unemployment, and there's almost riots in the streets in this country. 30% unemployment. Boom, no food subsidies. Boom, no school milk program. It was genocide. It was economic genocide. There's no other way to describe what was done. Go and read Naomi Klein's book, The Shock Doctrine. It goes into great detail about this. Go and read Lyndon LaRouche's great book, The Ugly Truth about Milton Friedman. Right? There is a lot written about this. The shock therapy economics that they implemented on Chile was devastating economically. So these and the economic miracle that happened in Chile didn't happen until like 1982. These libertarians who want to tell you, the economic miracle of Chile was from libertarianism, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Chile did not have its economic miracle until 1982, after Pinochet fired Milton Friedman. After 3 or 4 years of economically devastating Chile, selling off all the state industries and all of that, finally, Augusto Pinochet feared he might be overthrown, and so he kicked Milton Friedman out of the country, and he started renationalizing things. And the economic miracle that happened in the early 80s in Chile happened after the military in Chile completely moved away from libertarianism. So anyone who looks at Chile and says, we need a Pinochet now, they're out of their minds, number one, and it shows you that they're just evil. Some libertarians, there are certain libertarians that are just evil, okay? Most libertarians are not. But there are some libertarians who really don't care about economic data. They just want to kill communists. They are Ayn Rand objectivists. They are triggered by, they're the kind of person that is afraid to feel empathy for another person. Right? They feel they feel like if they feel empathy for another person, that'll make them weak somehow. So they want to impress everybody by how they have no empathy. And so, they want to impress everyone by how mean they can be. It's this Ayn Rand mental illness that, the libertarian objectivist types have. And they are aroused. They're like, yeah, I want to kill communists, drop them out of helicopters. Yeah, I don't want those poor people to get food. I hope they die. That way they don't reproduce because they're inferior. You know, it's that kind of evil satanic libertarian, right? They're the ones that have this mythology that somehow what Milton Friedman did was good for Chile. It was not good for Chile, economically speaking. Again, is Ben Norton going to talk about any of this? No. Ben Norton's just going to go on and on about, oh, evil America carried out the coup. Is that true? Yes. But I'm giving you a deeper analysis. I'm giving you a deeper analysis than this, right? Is that the Chilean coup was unique because it brought in neoliberal shock therapy economics. And it was a laboratory for neoliberal shock therapy economics, and it proved that it doesn't work. So much so that Pinochet, in order to avoid being overthrown, had to move away from them. And that there's all kinds of money and documentaries and films all trying to convince you that neoliberal economics, libertarian economic policies were good for Chile. And it's a lie. Basic economic data shows the opposite of the truth, right? And it's just like how they said communism never worked anywhere. It clearly did. Russia and China became superpowers. Libertarian economics did not work in Chile. It devastated Chile, economically speaking. But there's all kinds of money and all kinds of selective interpretations trying to convince you that somehow what Pinochet did in 1973 by letting the Chicago boys, the Chicago School of Economics, wreck Chile, that somehow that was a good thing. It wasn't. The statistics speak for themselves. Mass unemployment, mass hunger. I mean, what was done in Chile economically devastated the place. But I go on. But I go on. There's a certain crowd of leftists, and I've noticed this, and it's very interesting. Amy Goodman, Noam Chomsky, Francis Fox Piven, certain crowd of leftists who seem to believe that Chile is the only place that ever had a coup. It's very weird. They don't ever talk about the coup in Indonesia. They don't ever talk about the coup in Iran. They seem to think that Chile is the only country that ever had a coup. It's weird. There's an obsession with the Chilean coup, especially among Latin American leftists. They talk about the Chilean coup. They don't talk about the coup in Guatemala. They don't talk about the coups in Argentina. They don't talk about the coups in Brazil. They don't talk about the coups in Peru. It's like they think that Chile is the only, I mean, and it's weird, right? And if you talk to them, they know these other coups happened. They know that these other coups happened, but they just don't get the same amount of attention. And that's interesting as well. And again, these are insights you will not get from other people. Right? I'm giving you insights here that other leftists, other socialists won't give you. I'm talking about the economic impact of the Chilean coup. I'm talking about other things. But like, take a look. This is a clip of Francis Fox Piven, the labor historian. This is her argument with Milton Friedman, where she brings up the coup. And it's been a while since I've watched this, but I think this is relevant, right? So let's put it on. I guess it's been a while since I've watched this. I won't say too much about it, but this is Francis Fox Piven confronting Milton Friedman about the coup in Chile.
About the free enterprise system and its capacity to produce both freedom and greater equality to relieve poverty, the test of that argument has to be made everywhere that the free enterprise system has been extended, has penetrated. The test of your argument is not only in what happened to England and the ostensible decline or not the decline of the English economy or what happened in the United States. The test of that argument has to look at what the free enterprise system has meant for the majority of people who do not live in England and do not live in the United States, who do not live in the mother countries, but rather live in that part of the world where most people live, and where most people have had their lives disrupted. Peasants have lost their land, traumatic destruction.
Excuse me, you got to compare
because of the free enterprise system.
Excuse me, you've got to compare something with something. Will you tell me the alternative, which has improved the lot of the ordinary people? What is the system which, in your mind, has been successful?
Communism, the Soviet Union, China, Cuba. Many of these countries have lifted themselves up out of poverty and industrialized with socialism. Libya raised millions of people out of poverty with socialism, turned a desert country, raised living standards. There's many, many examples of, the Soviet Union became a superpower. China became a superpower. Libya had the highest life expectancy on the African continent. Communism, that would be the alternative.
Most people through most history have lived in tyranny and misery. It's only a very tiny minority at any time that have been able to escape from it. That's the real beauty. That's the real achievement. Now, will you tell me what the alternative system is which has achieved? Well, tell me what. Excuse me.
And I say that elsewhere in the world.
What's the alternative? What's the alternative? What's your alternative?
The free enterprise system is of itself not an alternative because, as you agree, it does not exist. We are arguing really to defend those interventions which have been made by government on the behalf of people in an effort to reduce inequality, in an effort to reduce oppression.
And tell me, which of those are you defending in which of these countries where those interventions have benefited the masses? In most of the countries where you have departed from the free enterprise system, you have had a small class benefited at the expense of the masses. If you take the
Why won't, and of course, she won't just go over basic economic data of the Soviet Union's economic achievements or China's economic achievements or Cuba's economic achievements. She can't do that because she's on PBS and she's an American professor. So he's just saying, oh, where has any other system worked? And
African countries which have become one-party dictatorships, are you going to tell me they have benefited the masses?
They tend to have, yes. Libya, under the leadership of Gaddafi, greatly benefited the population.
I'm astounded by the examples of the third world that are brought into here. Those parts of the non-capitalist world in which the capitalist system has penetrated are typically higher income places than those parts where they haven't. Are you talking in any kind of testable hypothesis, or is it just axiomatic that it's so? Because the studies that I've seen indicate that those countries where capitalists have never gone near them are poorer than they've ever been. They were poor before the capitalists got there, they were poor while the capitalists were there, and they're poor after the capitalists have left.
Yeah, all right. Well, that wasn't the clip I was looking for. But there's another clip of Frances Fox Piven. Let me see if I can find it. Where she confronts him about Chile. Let me see if I can find that. Let me see if I can find that clip. That was interesting. You'll notice she wouldn't bring up the example of the Soviet Union. She wouldn't bring that up. And so that's, if you won't stand up for existing socialism, you've already lost the argument. You've already lost the argument. But let me see if I can find it. Let me see if I can find this clip. Let me see if I can find this clip. I don't think I can find it. But my point that I was making was that there are many, many leftists who the only CIA coup that they ever talk about is Chile. The only CIA coup they ever speak about is Chile. And they don't talk about any of the other ones. Why is that? Well, I recently started reading about something, and this blew my mind. This was one of the biggest projects of the Chilean government. Now, I can't believe that no one ever talks about this. No one ever talks about this. But this is quite an important factor in all of this. Project Cybersyn. Has anyone ever heard of Project Cybersyn? Right? I had never heard of this. I started reading about this recently. What is Project Cybersyn? Project Cybersyn was a project from 1971 to 1973 during the presidency of Salvador Allende, aimed at constructing a distributed decision support system to aid in the management of the national economy. The project consisted of 4 modules: an economic simulator, custom software to check factory performance, an operations room, and a national network of telex machines that were linked to a mainframe computer. The principal architect of the system was British operations research scientist Stafford Beer. And the system embodied his notion of organizational cybernetics in industrial management. One of its main objectives was to devolve decision-making power within industrial enterprises to workplaces in order to develop self-regulation of factories. After the military coup took place on September 11th, 1973, Cybersyn was abandoned and the operations room was destroyed. Stafford Beer, a British consultant in management cybernetics, sympathized with the stated ideals of Chilean socialism, maintaining its democratic system and autonomy of workers instead of imposing a USSR-style top-down command control. And they go on to talk about how Cybersyn was really, really key in the development of modern computers. If you look at it, it was a very, very big aspect of modern computers and artificial intelligence and all of that. And that the Chilean government was clearly working with some faction in the British ruling class to develop computer software to manage an economy. That's not inherently a bad thing, right? I mean, obviously, in a socialist society, such things would be to our benefit, be greatly beneficial. But I can guarantee you that, what's his name, Peter Stafford, and the British computer companies that were backing him, while Salvador Allende may have wanted, or Stafford Beer, that was his name, Stafford Beer, while Salvador Allende may have wanted to use the Cybersyn system for good, I can guarantee you that Stafford Beer and the people who backed Stafford Beer did not want to use them for good. Right? Stafford Beer is a British theorist and consultant, a professor at Manchester Business School, known for his work in the field of operational research and management cybernetics. He joined United States Steel and persuaded the management to fund. He was working for steel corporations. I mean, he was working for American companies to develop computer programs to manage people, right? This makes me think about that operation. People talk about how at Starbucks they have the computer program that regulates and assigns people's shifts. You know, they don't have a person who says this person will work here and work there. They have a computer program that does it. And often workers get stuck with the clopening shift. Did you read about this? Where they have to close and open the store at the same time. They only have a couple hours to sleep. They work an 8-hour shift, and then they maybe get to go sleep for 3 hours, and then they come back and they have to work another 8-hour shift. And it devastates them. Right? Stafford Beer was in Chile trying to develop computer systems that would be used by big corporations to manage their workers. That's pretty weird. Obviously, that doesn't justify the coup. But it may indicate why there was more opposition to the Chilean coup from some sections of the ruling class than others. And this is that push and pull that I've talked about between the managerial bourgeoisie, the section of the ruling class that wants to stabilize society and degrow in order to preserve capitalism, and the entrepreneurial bourgeoisie, that wants a totally unregulated market in order to maximize their profits. And while Chile was drifting into the Soviet camp and aligning with the Soviet Union, aligning with Fidel Castro, it appears that to some degree or other, there was some kind of British intelligence, managerial bourgeoisie that was also using Chile as a testing ground for their operations. This is fascinating stuff. Project Cybersyn. And that it appears that a section of the imperialist ruling class was willing to play ball with Salvador Allende. And that a lot of the evil managerial programs, a lot of the simulator technology that is now being used by sections of the ruling class was apparently developed through this project where the Chilean government was cooperating with individuals like Stafford Beer. And this is very, very interesting. And again, this is a kind of analysis you're not going to get elsewhere. And it's very interesting. I'm confident Salvador Allende would have used Project Cybersyn for good, but you can imagine that the British Empire or U.S. Steel or Starbucks or some corporation would probably use it for much more sinister purposes. You can be sure they're using artificial intelligence and simulators now as they carry out their great reset and their agenda of degrowing the population of the Western countries and driving down living standards. You can be sure, you can be absolutely sure that they are using simulator technology that can probably trace its roots back to Cybersyn. So that's important to keep in mind as well. So again, folks, I gave you analysis there of September 11th, 2001 and September 11th, 1973 that you wouldn't get elsewhere. Because we take things to the next level. And that brings me to the third thing I want to talk about tonight, which is that the Party of Socialism and Liberation, the PSL, also known as the Party of Sellout Liberals, the Party of Sellout Liberals has announced they are running a presidential campaign. And usually I like the idea of socialists running for president. Anyone who's running for president in the name of socialism, getting the message out there, I see it as a good thing. I do not think PSL running for president is a good thing. I do not think it's a good thing. Their campaign is proving itself to be a travesty already. It just started. And it is a nightmare. It is an absolute nightmare. I'm going to show you various planks from the PSL platform. This is their official. I'm showing you their official graphics. These are not graphics that I've made. These are official PSL graphics from their campaign. First one that needs to be called out is this. This is unbelievable. Save the planet from capitalism. We can only save the planet and prepare for the worst effects of climate change through a democratically planned economy. Convert all private fossil fuel corporations into public enterprises dedicated to producing clean energy. Transport, agricultural, transportation, so these crucial sectors are sustainable and meet the needs of the people. Do you know what it would mean to cut off fossil fuels in America? Every working family that gets its energy from natural gas, gets its heat in winter from natural gas, that has a coal power plant, electrify their home, cut off. Everybody who uses oil or coal or natural gas for electricity or heating gets cut off. This would lead to energy poverty throughout America, right? We saw what happened when the power grid in Texas collapsed. We saw what happened. And we see all over the third world. The United States is going out of its way to maintain energy poverty in the third world, right? When Joe Biden was running for office, he wrote an article for the Council on Foreign Relations, the Foreign Affairs magazine. He wrote an article called America Must Lead Again. Why America Must Lead Again. Rescuing U.S. Foreign Policy After Trump by Joe Biden. This is his official article, March and April 2020, basically explaining what Joe Biden wants, why the Trump administration is wrong. And what did this article say? What was one of his main grievances in the world, one of the main things Biden set out to change when he was president? We will lock in enforceable commitments that will reduce emissions in global shipping and aviation. And we will pursue strong measures to make sure other nations can't undercut the United States economically as we meet our commitments. That includes insisting that China, the world's largest emitter of carbon, stop subsidizing coal exports and outsourcing pollution to other countries by financing billions of dollars worth of dirty fossil fuel energy projects through the Belt and Road. Joe Biden said that one of his main goals as president was to stop China from bringing electricity to people in Africa, to stop China from bringing electricity to people in South America, to stop China from bringing electricity to people in Asia, right? I've been to South America. I've been to Venezuela. I've been to Brazil. China has enabled so many people in Brazil who lived in conditions of not having electricity to get electricity. They built hydroelectric power plants all over Brazil. In Africa, they've built coal power plants. What Biden is saying is that one of the missions of his administration is to maintain energy poverty in the developing world. That is one of the things that they're doing, that in the name of saving Mother Earth, it is one of the missions of the Joe Biden administration to keep people around the world from getting access to electricity from China, because China's going all over, and Alex is in Brazil. He's seen it. It's true. China has enabled millions of people in Brazil to get electricity. Joe Biden's administration wants to stop them from doing that. No. China can't build power plants around the world. People around the world need to stay poor. That's the degrowth agenda. That's imperialism, right? It's about degrowth. PSL's platform says it's not enough. It's not enough that the United States is going around the world preventing countries from getting energy and getting electrification in the name of climate change. No. According to the PSL, we got to bring that to the United States. Everybody in the United States who now gets their electricity, from oil and coal and natural gas has to get it cut off. And instead, they're going to convert all the existing power plants, all the private fossil fuel corporations, they're going to convert them to public enterprises producing clean energy. Well, I'm sorry. If we took every coal power plant in America and every natural gas outlet in America, we took all the fossil fuels in America and replaced them all with solar panels and windmills, we would have about 10% of the energy output we have in the United States. This is genocide, what they're calling for. This is genocide, right? They buy into the Malthusian argument of limited resources, overpopulation. They think these American people, they're just using too much electricity. They got too much lights in their home. They got too much heat in the winter. And so we are going to, in the name of saving Mother Earth, we are going to reduce consumption. We're going to replace all the coal and all the oil and all the natural gas with windmills and solar panels. And the American people are going to use 10% of the electricity that they now use. This is the opposite of what FDR did. During the Great Depression, FDR had a rural, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and he went out of his way to build power plants, to electrify. That's what Stalin did in Russia. Stalin went out of his way to build power plants. No. The PSL is going to reduce consumption, and they are going to make sure that big chunks of the United States experience what Texas experienced a few winters ago and have no power, no heat in the wintertime. This is evil. This is evil. What else is in the PSL platform? This is a great one, right? This is a great one. Okay. Now, you would think that with the attack on our civil liberties right now, with, it's been revealed that we're being spied on by the NSA, the attack against Yahoo that's going on, the attack on the right to protest, the anti-abortion protesters they swept up under the conspiracy law, the Cop City protesters that just got hit with the RICO charges. You would think that they would be calling for an end to the police state, right? Right? That would make sense, right? That's what we call for. We say no low-wage police state. You'd think they would be defending the civil liberties of Americans. Nope. This is what they said. Instead of standing up for the civil liberties of Americans, end the war on Black America. A war has been waged on Black America from the foundation of this country, etc. So they want to make sure that all the white people in America, all the Asian people in America, all the Latino people in America who are worried about the police state too, don't align with Black people. They want to make it about race, not about class. They don't want to make it about capitalism turning into fascism. They want to make this all about the Black community versus everyone else. And that's why the PSL has gone out of its way to attack a good friend of ours named Douglas Kim, because he's concerned about the hate crimes committed against Asian Americans. And they attacked him for pointing out that these hate crimes are taking place. They are basically, they don't want to talk about the low-wage police state. They don't want to talk about civil liberties. They don't want to build a united front that brings to the forefront the issue of police brutality, right? And highlights an issue that does affect the Black community more than everybody else. No, they want white workers who are mad about police brutality to think that the Black movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, is their enemy. They want Latino workers who are worried about the police state to think that the Black Lives Matter movement is their enemy. They want to make sure that we have a conversation about how it's bad for Black people and white people have it too good and should be ashamed of themselves. That's how they want to have the conversation. They want to have an identity politics conversation. They don't want to build a mass movement to stop the police state, right? They could have put end the police state. They could have said stop police terror, but no. They said end the war on Black America, right? Because white Americans are just doing great right now. In Appalachia, and in the trailer parks of America, and in the deep South, everyone's just doing great, right? And, Asian Americans that are getting beaten up on the subways and having hate crimes committed against them, they're just doing great, right? And we admit, we don't deny that the Black community is the biggest victim of police brutality. We don't deny that slavery existed, but they are framing it up in a way to prevent solidarity. They are against class solidarity. They want to say, talk about what happens to Black people and don't talk about other communities. Don't unite people. Don't bring people together. They want to divide people. Right? And there's a reason that CNN says the exact same thing as PSL, because this is the agenda of the ultra-rich. The last thing the ultra-rich want is a mass movement of people defending their civil liberties and defending their rights. What they want is Black Americans to hate white Americans and white Americans to hate Black Americans and white Americans to point at the Black people and say, you don't care about us, and Black Americans to point at the white people and say, your life is too good, and everyone to just have a big argument about who's got it too good while we all get poorer. That's what the ruling class wants, and that's why they promote identity politics. And that's also what the PSL wants. My wife seems to be enjoying the program. That's also what the PSL wants. The PSL has decided they don't want to fight the emerging low-wage police state. Instead, they want to talk about identity politics. They want to have a conversation about how black people have it the worst off. That's what they want to do. Well, that's not helpful. What else is in the PSL program? What else is in the PSL program? Oh, this is great. This is my favorite. This is classic. End the rule of money and lock up the corrupt elite. Ban lobbying and institute a ban on former politicians holding executive jobs in the private sector. Public financing of all elections. So what this is this is a call for lawfare against dissidents, right? In Argentina, they recently went after Cristina Kirchner. We saw how Lula da Silva, when he was running for president of Brazil, they railroaded him to jail on charges of corruption. Isabel dos Santos has been driven out of Angola. Imran Khan has been driven out of office and imprisoned. And also, we saw what happened to Pedro Castillo in Peru. This is just a call for lawfare. They want Biden, who they're defending from Trump, to be able to throw anyone who questions him in jail for corruption. That's all this is. And you'll notice this is supposed to be a socialist group. I mean, and this fits, right? They're talking about ban lobbying, right? Their program is very much, Bernie Sandersism with Maoist characteristics, right? They sound, on the one hand, they sound like they want to set up some kind of people's revolutionary government. And on the other hand, they sound like money out of politics, ban lobbying, right? I mean, it's like, wait, and the thing is, and this is what you have to remember about PSL. This is very interesting here, right? What PSL says about the hypothetical communist future doesn't really matter that much because we're not there. What they say about, eventually when we come to power, we want to blah, 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 that doesn't matter. What matters is what stand they take on things that are actually happening right now. Right? And their platform goes back and forth. Sometimes it sounds like this Maoist, they're going to seize power and have a revolutionary democratic, whatever. They're doing the Maoist thing. Other times it sounds like these are policies that they would vote for in Congress. And whenever it's policies that actually could get implemented now, they're on the same side as AOC. They're on the same side as Biden. And they're trying to degrow the United States. Right? I mean, and it's weird, and it doesn't matter. The other stuff doesn't matter. You can say anything. Yes, after the revolution, when we seize power, we will. No one cares. That doesn't matter. What matters is what position you take now. And the positions that I just showed you that they take now are bad. Right? They, are implementing degrowth right now. BlackRock is forcing countries in the developing world to adopt organic agriculture and reduce their crop outputs right now. Right? They are targeting and imprisoning Donald Trump to prevent him from running for office right now, using lawfare and corruption charges against him. Right? They are doing that right now. There is a police state emerging in this country where they're outlawing the right to protest and dissent. They're doing that right now. And PSL doesn't want to stop it. And they don't want to build a united front to stop it. They want to point fingers at white people and say, you should be suppressed more to make it fair. And we'll just have a conversation about how black people are the most oppressed. We're not going to have a conversation. We're not going to have a conversation about the police state and the civil liberties of all Americans. Folks, the Party of Socialism and Liberation was so determined to stop the Rage Against the War Machine rally that in the lead up to the Rage Against the War Machine protest last August, February 19th, their members went all out calling it a white supremacist rally. And you'll notice that in their platform and elsewhere, they call for outlawing white supremacists. The PSL basically wanted the Rage Against the War Machine rally to be outlawed and criminalized, which is something that could happen right now. Look what they're doing to the Uhuru movement. The Party of Socialism and Liberation wanted the Rage Against the War Machine rally outlawed. They called it a white supremacist rally. Their members called it fascist. They called it Nazi. They called it anti-war, so white. They called it every nasty name in the book. And they were basically calling for the government to violently suppress this anti-war rally because, God forbid, libertarians were there, Jackson Hinkle was there, CPI was a sponsor of it. That was what they were doing. And that's something that could actually happen. That's not something in the Maoist future, right? That's something, that's not something in their Maoist fantasy about when they come to power. That's something that could actually happen. PSL wants to imprison every single person in this photo. All right, this is a photo from the Rage Against the War Machine rally. PSL, all over Twitter, their members said that this was a white supremacist rally, and they call for jailing white supremacists. So they want every single one of these persons in a prison camp. That is what PSL's agenda is. And they want to cut off their electricity. They want to throw them in a prison camp. They don't want to build a united movement to defend their civil liberties. That's what PSL is calling for. PSL is not a socialist party. They are a fascist party. As much as I don't like the PSL, I don't want their rallies to be outlawed. I think they have a right to protest. But PSL says that Rage Against the War Machine is a Nazi rally because Tulsi Gabbard spoke there, and they want every single person who attended Rage Against the War Machine to be thrown in prison. That is their position. And if you are in PSL and you're watching this and that's not your position, tell me why you've never clarified that. Tell me why. Tell me why in the lead up to the Rage Against the War Machine rally, I had all kinds of PSL people tweeting at me, you're a Nazi, you're a white supremacist, we're going to be there, we're going to kick your ass, we're going to be violent to you. Tell me why PSL has never said the opposite. Tell me why. Show me one place where PSL has said that Rage Against the War Machine wasn't a Nazi rally and said that they don't want it outlawed. Show me one place, because I can show you 100 places that their members called the rally a white supremacist rally. They want to ban the Rage Against the War Machine coalition, number one. They want to degrow the economy, completely cut off fossil fuels, reduce living standards, right? They don't want a united front against the emerging police state. Instead, they want identity politics, and they want to focus on what's being done to black people and not any other community, not any other demographic. Screw Asian Americans, screw white people, screw Latinos, screw every other demographic. There's a war on black people and no one else. That is the agenda of the Party of Socialism and Liberation. They want lawfare, right? They want to implement, they basically want what Biden is doing to Trump right now, what the Department of Justice is doing to the Uhuru movement right now. They have it in their program that they want that to be done on a much wider scale, that any critic of the Biden administration gets charged with corruption and thrown in jail. That's what PSL wants. PSL is a fascist party. That is what they are. Degrowth, suppression of dissent, identity politics, playing different races and nationalities against each other, accusing anyone who talks about building a united movement to defend civil liberties or stop the wars of being a Nazi, and calling for their outlaw. PSL is a fascist organization. That is what they are. And they are our main threat. Why are they our main threat? They are our main threat because they pretend to be a communist party. The communist countries of the world don't want degrowth. China is building power plants all over Africa. And the African people are rising up to kick out French colonialism, to kick out Wall Street, and to build power plants. And PSL's program opposes power plants. The people of Latin America are rising up right now to demand the building of power plants, and PSL's agenda is to oppose power plants. The people of America are angry about their rights being taken away, and PSL says, nope, the only people that are allowed to be upset about their rights taken away are black people, and if you want a united front, You're a white supremacist. You're a Nazi. The PSL wants to implement lawfare. They want to throw Tulsi Gabbard in jail. They want to throw Marjorie Taylor Greene in jail. They want AOC and Bernie Sanders and Biden to be able to imprison anybody on corruption charges that stands up to their agenda. How is PSL a socialist party? How are they a socialist party? And they're neutral in Ukraine. They don't support the people of Donbass, the people of Donetsk and Lugansk. They don't support them. They don't support them in being defended from the U.S.-backed NATO thugs. They refused to sign the Paris Declaration of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. How is PSL anything but a fascist organization? You know, I tweeted out, I'll read it to you here, the real platform of the PSL. I tweeted it out, and I hope people enjoy it. You know, I was intentionally being provocative, but I tweeted out, this is the real platform of the PSL. So I will read to you what I wrote, and I hope that they read it, and I hope that it makes them angry. That's what I hope. The real platform of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. 1, imprison all Trump supporters for insurrection. Brian Becker openly called for this, and he did. There's radio interviews you can listen to. 2, outlaw Rage Against the War Machine and all anti-war protests they don't control because they are, quote, racist. See Twitter last February. They openly were calling Rage Against the War Machine a Nazi white supremacist rally. 3, outlaw churches, synagogues, and mosques that oppose abortion. Go to any of their pro-choice rallies and listen to the speeches. They openly call for government suppression of anybody who's against abortion for religious reasons. 4, cut off electricity and heat to most of Americans by immediately going off fossil fuels. It's in their platform. 5, reduce the population and impose restrictions on production. Capitalism is when we want growth, and growth is bad, right? Growth is bad. Watch Planet of the Humans. Oh my God, right? 6, heavy taxation, right? Because as they say in their video, socialism is about redistribution of wealth. Means of production. What's that? Some autistic white male BS, probably. Oh my God. Socialism is when we share the wealth and we distribute the wealth. It's like a welfare state where we pay taxes to cover social programs. Oh my God, right? 7, crush small businesses or maybe just burn them down in riots, right? Because that's all the PSL has done, for the past few years. They've been the stage managers of Black Lives Matter rallies that have burned down Black communities. Right? And 8, promote hate crimes against Asian Americans. PSL members viciously targeted Douglas Kim for pointing them out. That's a good friend of our show. And I said, I don't think so. PSL can shove it. And I mean, we have to stand up to PSL. PSL is a menace, on the Korean Peninsula right now, right? There is a danger of a new war. And PSL has gone to war against the People's Democracy Party of South Korea, right? If you look at the People's Democracy Party of South Korea's Wikipedia page, it's been edited to accuse them of being pro-Trump, to accuse them of being anti-Semitic. The People's Democracy Party of South Korea knows that Trump is more friendly to North Korea and peace on the Korean Peninsula. However, the PSL is insane, and they run this Korean-American group called Notatol that had a rally claiming that President Yoon of South Korea is, quote, like Trump. No, if President Yoon of South Korea was like Trump, he would be meeting with Kim Jong-un, you fucking idiots, right? PSL is some kind of sick government operation to try and keep socialist countries attached to the Democratic Party. That's what it is, right? And it is about trying to keep socialist countries in an alliance with the degrowth faction, with the ultra monopolists in the United States, that are trying to drive down living standards. And if you're a socialist, socialism is about growth. And, you know, I'm ending my opening remarks for tonight. I got plenty of super chats to talk about. I'm ending my opening remarks tonight. I want to put a woman on the screen, and I thank God every day for this woman. I thank God that I found this woman. This is one of the women who has been a great influence on my life. Right there, you will see you've got W.E.B. Du Bois, you've got Mao, the leader of the Chinese Revolution, and you have an amazing woman named Anna Louise Strong. Anna Louise Strong. Anna Louise Strong was from Seattle. She was from Seattle, Washington. Her father was a Christian minister. And from a small, young age, she was taught that it was her duty to be right in her soul. Right in her soul. And Anna Louise Strong saw that while she had gotten an education when she was a child, there were many children in America who had to work in factories. They had to be child laborers. And so she started advocating for the rights of children. And she did a photo exhibit exposing the horrors of child labor. And that led her to become interested in socialism. Anna Louise Strong. And she went to the Soviet Union and she saw the amazing things that Stalin was doing with the 5-year plans. She wrote this amazing book. It's an amazing, beautiful book about her life story. It's called I Change Worlds, the Remaking of an American. And she lived in Moscow for many years. She was the editor of the Moscow News. And Anna Louise Strong is amazing. And I discovered her writings when I was a teenager. And what is amazing about Anna Louise Strong is if you read her book, The Stalin Era, if you read I Change Worlds, it is optimistic, constructive socialism. She talks about the American people and how they're motor-minded and how we're a country of hardworking people and go-getters, people who want to get things done. And she talked about Christianity and love and brotherhood and how in the Soviet Union she saw Americanism, that the Soviet Union was the new America, because in the Soviet Union, they believed in building and constructing, and in the Soviet Union, they believed in working hard, and they believed in caring for each other and loving their neighbors, and that the Soviet Union incarnated everything that was good in the American spirit. It's absolutely beautiful, Anna Louise Strong's writings. Anna Louise Strong was born in the Midwest. I think she was born in Iowa. And you know, she became a good friend of Mao. Her nickname, they called her the Paper Tiger Lady because she interviewed Mao Zedong. She interviewed him, and it's in her interview with Mao that he gave his famous quote about how the imperialists and all reactionaries are paper tigers. And Anna Louise Strong was a dynamic, amazing person. Every page of her writings flows with just a love for humanity, a love for America, and a love for Russia and China. And she lived in China. She spent her final years of life in China. She died in China. She was a communist, if there ever was one. But Anna Louise Strong was not the kind of communist that the PSL are. Anna Louise Strong was not the kind of communist that the woke left are. Anna Louise Strong was an optimistic, patriotic, Christian, constructive socialist. She may have become an atheist. I don't know. But the Christian teaching that she got from her father, who was a minister, and the values that she had and the drive to become right in her soul flowed through everything that she did. Anna Louise Strong is a beautiful human being. That is the kind of socialism that I believe in. That is the kind of socialism that got me to New York City, that got me to Iran, that got me to Russia, that got me to find Jesus Christ and return to God. That is the kind of socialism that led me to create the Center for Political Innovation. And the only type of socialism that's ever going to build a mass movement in this country is going to be optimistic socialism. It's going to be the socialism of a writer that I thank, the great Tyler McConnell, my favorite English teacher, Tyler McConnell, great guy from Missouri, a member of CPI. Tyler McConnell talked about he talked about and he wrote about, and he turned me on to Wallace Wattles. Wallace Wattles, the father of self-help, the Christian socialist optimist, the self-help, the science of becoming great, Jesus, the man and his works. Wallace D. Wattles. Look up Wallace Wattles. It's a similar mindset. That's the kind of socialism we need. Not the pessimism, not the destructive socialism, not tearing things down, but the optimistic, constructive, growth-oriented socialism of Anna Louise Strong, of Wallace Wattles, of course, of Stalin, of Mao, of Enver Hoxha, of Kim Il-sung, of Fidel Castro. But the only people that hold on to that legacy in the United States now are the Center for Political Innovation. Right? We have revived that socialism. I can see it in our friends in the Party of Communists. I can see it in some of the people that are attracted to the LaRouche movement. I can even see it in some libertarians. I can see it among some libertarians. But the point is that we need optimism. We need hopefulness. We need a socialism that can bring people together. A socialism that can rebuild America. A socialism that unleashes people's creativity and brilliance. That's the kind of socialism we need, and you're not going to get it from these other forces. And so that is my rant for tonight. So now, at this point, we will do the roll call. Oh, wow, we got a lot of Rumble rants to get through. We'll do the roll call. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. I'm looking at the Rumble. I'm looking at the Rockfin. I'm looking at the different places that people are watching this. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? We got Randall Wilson from Lexington, Kentucky is with us. Seasoned noob from China is with us. Saviero from Mexico is with us. Saviero from Mexico is with us. Who else is with us? Oh, and Panos. Thank you, Panos, for your super chat. Much appreciated. Jenny Lynn from Cincinnati. Stephen Ann from Georgia. Moonlight Beach, California. Scott S. La Union, the Philippines. Jamie from St. Paul. Ali from Toronto. Chester from England. Cleveland Pirate Alex. Patrick in Maine. Welcome, welcome, welcome. On the Rumble, we've got Anoan from Ontario. We've got Kiwi Corner from Auckland, New Zealand. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Your friend in Oklahoma. Shout out to Lori. We love you, Lori. Christopher in Texas. Gabby in Chicago. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Patrick in Maine. Alex from Brazil. A better America, Northern Michigan. Houston, Texas. Chase. M. Sparks from Pittsburgh. Chris in Salt Lake City, and he approves this message. All right, Chris. Neil, Tanya in Pluto. Mima Flowers in California. Bob Troy in New York. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Welcome, Rice. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you all here with us. Dean from the Gold Coast. Welcome, Dean. Welcome, welcome, Dean. So glad to have you here, Dean. Welcome, welcome. Names and locations, folks. Names and location. Jamie Turner from Boise, Idaho is on the Rumble. Welcome, welcome, Jamie. Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Ryan in Kansas City is with us tonight. Welcome, Ryan. Good to have you. Good to have you. Anybody else? Names and locations. And then we'll start answering people's questions. We'll start answering people's questions. All righty. All righty. Oh, KM from Northwest British Columbia. There we go. All righty. All righty. John Whitty in Houston. Welcome, welcome. All right. So now we'll do the Rumble rants first. That's how we've been doing it. So Delta V says, what's the difference between crony capitalism and free market capitalism? Well, Delta V, I am not a libertarian. And because I'm not a libertarian, I can tell you the awful truth. All capitalism is crony capitalism. Free market capitalism is crony capitalism. Whenever you have a group of people who own the means of production, you generally have a situation where they do their best to try and get the government to be rigged in their favor in order to keep it that way. Libertarians have this delusion that there's this thing called real capitalism, this magic thing called real capitalism. And if we just privatize everything, and if we just get the government out of the economy, huge amounts of wealth will amass in the hands of some people and not others. But those people with that huge amount of wealth will say, I believe in libertarian principles, so I am not going to go rig the government all over again. I don't know why they believe that will happen, because generally people with huge amounts of wealth want to keep it, and they tend to use that huge amounts of wealth to influence the economy, and you're right back where you started. But libertarian economics has this fantasy that we're going to have a totally unregulated, totally free market capitalist system, and there'll be huge amounts of inequality, but the government will just stay out of it and leave it that way, and it'll all work, and we'll all live happily ever after. And that's just a delusion. All capitalism is crony capitalism. I mean, the way the land of the United States was handed out to railroad companies was crony capitalism. The way the creation of capitalism, you go back to the origins of capitalism with what they call primitive accumulation, which was the ripping apart of feudalism. That was crony capitalism. Some people got the land, some people didn't. Capitalism is always crony capitalism and will always be crony capitalism. What is the process by which the IMF enslaves countries with bad loans? Well, generally what happens is the International Monetary Fund, which was created, and this is from Jamie Turner, he's on the Rumble. The International Monetary Fund, which was created by the Bretton Woods Conference. It's one of the, Western NATO countries' financial institutions. The International Monetary Fund goes to countries in the developing world and says, in order to help you develop and expand your economy, since you're an impoverished country, we're going to give you a loan. But this loan we're going to give you comes with some stipulations. Our economic advisors have to sit down with you and tell you about how it is that you have to regulate your economy. And in order to get your next loan, you're going to have to follow the advice that they give you. And this is the process. The countries get in debt. They have the IMF continue to loan them money, and in exchange for that, they let IMF economists regulate and run their economy. That's generally how these things work. And you can read all about it in Confessions of an Economic Hitman. You can read about it in, Naomi Klein's good book. There you go. All righty. Thoughts on Biden visiting Vietnam? What exactly is the historic partnership between the two countries? Yeah, exactly. The USA has killed millions of Vietnamese people, but it's important to note that the United States has been trying to manipulate Vietnam and China against each other for quite some time. The saddest example was the Kampuchea War of 1978, in which Vietnam was invaded by China, and that there is a long-standing ethnic rivalry there. Chinese folks and Vietnamese folks have fought each other for thousands of years. And now, they both have revolutionary governments that came out of anti-imperialist struggles that have fought and defeated U.S. imperialism, etc. But they still have differences, and there's disputed islands. There's islands that China, claims for itself that Vietnamese people think are theirs. And that there's just a long-standing division. And sometimes it seems like Vietnam is willing to cooperate with the United States against China. But other times it seems like it's not. Now, one thing that's pretty clear is that the Biden camp and the Obama-Biden camp are much more interested in courting Vietnam as an ally than Trump is. Trump went out of his way to highlight and pander to anti-communist Vietnamese communities. Whereas Biden, he just went to Vietnam. Obama became the first U.S. president to go to Vietnam. And the Biden camp is much more interested in courting Vietnam and pulling Vietnam into being an ally of the United States against China. Whereas the Trump administration is not. The Trump administration kind of panders to hard right, anti-communist activist circles, etc. And so because of that, Biden is trying to continue what Obama was doing. But there's a long history of this. The Kampuchea War is a great example. But, there's many people in Vietnam, though, that recognize that despite China's, unfortunate history with Vietnam, China is still a better ally than the United States, and that China is trying to do the same thing that they're doing, economically develop. So, the Vietnamese Communist Party, there's a push and pull within the Vietnamese Communist Party. Not everyone in the Vietnamese Communist Party wants to align with the United States. Not everyone in the Vietnamese Communist Party wants to align with China. And there are differences. There are differences among the Vietnamese communists on this question. So there we go. All righty. Jimmy Dore badly needs a dose of CPI optimism. He's laughing himself to death and destruction, once more echoing how the United States is over. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Optimism is something that we push pretty hard on this channel, and that, it's something that's largely lacking. Even people who agree with us are often not very optimistic. I like Jimmy Dore and I like what he does, but, these are dark times. But what I said last night on the great space that was organized with Lori Spencer, it was a great space, is that I think we should be honored to be alive during this time, because it means that we have the ability to change the course of history, that we've been selected to live in such challenging times because we can have a big impact, right? And that we should think that, it's a great honor that a higher power has selected us for these dark times, these challenging years. They wanted us to be here, right? And that we have the ability. We will see the end of U.S. imperialism. We will see American imperialism fall. We will be in the last days, the last generation of American imperialism, right? We will see socialism come to America. And that is an honor, but it's darkest before dawn. It is darkest before dawn. I was talking to somebody else today. The period that we're living in, right? This is not the period of the Civil War. This is not the period of the Roosevelt administration. We're living in a period that is defined by ideological correction. The country has clearly lost its way. Before the American Revolution, you had the Great Awakening, which was a mass spiritual movement expressing that there was a big problem in the 13 colonies, expressing that things were going in a bad direction, and it was a mass spiritual movement. It was kind of awakening the people. 20 or 30 years later, they then had the American Revolution. In the United States, a couple generations later, there was a feeling that slavery was just a big problem, and that that slavery was leading the country in a bad direction. You had the Second Great Awakening, which was a mass spiritual movement, reorienting the country, mobilizing the people to oppose slavery. And that then laid the basis for the fight ahead, right? And, even if you look at the 1930s, right, the Great Depression, the Roosevelt years, the years of the Communist Party, fighters starved. A generation before that, you had Eugene Debs going around and talking about the working class and the capitalist class. You had during that period, you had Upton Sinclair, you had Wallace Wattles, you had a mass kind of ideological socialist awakening that laid the basis for the fight ahead. We are living in a period of ideological correction and socialist awakening, right? The fight is going to come a little bit later. Right now, there's a huge amount of confusion as a result of the fall of the Soviet Union. And now we've entered a long-term capitalist crisis that is inescapable. And this is going to lead to the kind of things that will eventually lead to the formation of an anti-imperialist bloc in America and a united front. And we will eventually have a government of action that fights for working families. We will have the destruction of American imperialism. But right now, we have to lay the ideological foundations. And the Rage Against the War Machine was a great step forward, because it was the first time we saw an anti-war movement that wasn't tied down by the stupid left that I talked about earlier. The people who thought Osama bin Laden was a great anti-imperialist. The people who think Chile is the only coup that's ever happened, right? Rage Against the War Machine broke free from the cage of ideological confusion, etc. And it was libertarians, and it was Tulsi Gabbard, and it was a great step forward. And that's the beginning of the anti-monopoly coalition. And that's why I'm writing books like this. Bob Avakian's not a household name. A lot of people don't know who he is. But the kind of people that we might want to recruit are the kind of people that would look at his stuff, because he's a communist who's out there talking about being a communist in America. So writing books like this in this period is very important, right? We are laying the ideological foundations for the fight ahead. We've already seen, look, there are whole communities that have ripped off our messaging, that have basically listened to what we say on here, taken our messaging, watered it down, or distorted it in some way, and then mass marketed it for social media. That shows how much of an audience there is for people who talk this way, right? What we do is people are longing for it in their bones. And so this is a period of correction, of ideological correction. We are building, with the Center for Political Innovation, a community of people that are dedicated to these ideas. So yeah, there you go. There you go. All righty. Thoughts on Peter Dow becoming Cornell West campaign manager? Yeah. I don't know enough about this Peter person. I don't know enough about him. But I do know that he, Cornell West has let us all down. There's no way around that. Cornell West has really disappointed us in so many ways. So there you go. Thoughts on the abduction of Shin Sang-ok and Cho and-hee. People point me to this story like Muppets every time I bring up North Korea. I know this came from The Guardian first. Are those the film directors that claimed they were kidnapped? Because I heard that there are a couple. Is that who that is? Let me Google those names just to be sure, because I don't want to respond if that's not who that is. But there are a couple film directors. Let me make sure that this is the right person, right? Right. All right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. So 1978, these two filmmakers, the story goes that they were in Hong Kong making a movie, and the North Koreans kidnapped them from Hong Kong and took them to North Korea. That's the story. Well, many people have speculated that if you look at the story, it looks like what happened is that they defected to North Korea voluntarily. And in the 90s, during the food crisis, they wanted to come home because people were starving. There wasn't food. And so they made up a story about how they, got abducted, right? During the 1990s, things were really bad in North Korea. The Soviet Union had collapsed. Their food system came to a grinding halt. People were starving to death. Many people who had defected to North Korea got the hell out of there in the 90s because they didn't want to starve, because the United States, had devastated North Korea. The 1990s was a bad time in North Korea. Their economy had been growing pretty strongly prior to that, but in the 1990s, they couldn't get oil, and their food system depended on petroleum. And they couldn't get oil in the 1990s, and it was a bad time. And during the 1990s, there were a number of American GIs who had defected to North Korea who returned to the United States. And when they returned, they had wild stories about how awful they'd been persecuted. Joseph Dresnok stayed there, and when he was interviewed by BBC, he said these stories are false. That's what they had to say in order to come back. And this story that you mentioned, right, the abduction, there's many people who look at that. I haven't done a huge amount of investigation, but I've discussed it with many people who think what happened is that these two filmmakers, they apparently were communists at the time, right? They were communists, and they were sympathetic to communism or whatever. And they just decided they wanted to move to North Korea, to a communist country. They got offered a job in the film industry in North Korea. And they voluntarily defected to North Korea. But then in the 1990s, when the economy of North Korea was suffering and devastated by the fall of the Soviet Union and the sanctions, at that point, they wanted to defect back. They wanted to leave. So because of that, they left, right? They didn't like it. Now, I guess I'm reading that they left in 1986. So that's before the collapse of the Soviet Union really got going. But there's many people that believe their claim about being abducted was simply a way to come back, right? That if they had defected voluntarily, they wouldn't be allowed to return. And then that's one thing that happened. That happens a lot. I remember I went and studied. I studied at a peace studies program when I was in college. And there was a woman there who'd been born in North Korea, and her parents were from an African country. And they had fled to the United States during the 90s, during the food crisis. And I asked her about North Korea, and she said, I don't want to talk about it. And she wouldn't talk about it. And she said she doesn't talk about it because it's not what Americans think it was, but she just didn't want to talk about it, right? And that there were a lot of people, like, again, North Korea, you had millions of people dying of malnutrition in North Korea because of the sanctions the USA put on the country, because their food system came to a grinding halt. There were a lot of people who were sympathizers with the revolution and such who, died, right? Or fled. I mean, it was, this was a country that was collapsing, right? I mean, if you were in a country, even if you agreed with the country and its revolution, and if you agreed with it, but you couldn't eat if you lived there, you would leave. But in order to leave, you might have to make an agreement with the country that takes you in to say things that you know not to be true. And so, I don't want to pretend that I know what it's like to be in those kind of circumstances, but the American GIs who came back to North Korea, I mean, Joseph Dresdok, in the interviews that he gave to BBC, he says they just made this stuff up so they could come back to the United States. And it was true. These guys were soldiers who defected. They quit the army and walked across the demilitarized zone, and they were living in North Korea. And then there was a food crisis and people were starving to death, and they were like, oh shit, I'm going to get out of here. Well, you can't just go back to the United States. They're going to throw you in jail. So they agreed to come back and do a bunch of interviews on American TV about how North Korea tortured them and did all these awful things. And then they were allowed to live, right? And this kind of stuff happens, right? There was an African-American man, who came back to the United States after the fall of the Soviet Union. And he was an African-American man in the 1930s who'd become a communist, and he moved to the Soviet Union and he worked in a factory. And he wasn't the only one. There were many, many black Americans who defected to the Soviet Union because there was no racism in the Soviet Union, right? I mean, it was illegal to be a racist. Paul Robeson wanted his children to go to school in the Soviet Union because they wouldn't experience racism there. The Soviet Union was on the side of black people. Well, there was an older African-American man who was interviewed by the BBC. And in the 1990s, after the Soviet Union fell, when Russia's economy was collapsing, he came back to America. And he came back to America, but he had a little bit of a problem, which is that he had been elected to a government position in the Soviet Union. He'd been like the mayor of a city. Well, U.S. law is that if you hold a position in a foreign government, you lose your U.S. citizenship. So what did he say? The communists forced me. I had no idea what was going on. One day they just took me to a place and told me I was the mayor. I had no idea. Bullshit. Bullshit. I'm sure there were plenty of Russians who wanted to be the mayor of that city. You wanted that job. You took that job, but then the Soviet Union collapsed and you wanted to get back into America. You wanted to get your American passport back. No, Stalin didn't force you to become the mayor of that city. No, and this is a thing that happens, okay? And again, the 90s in Russia, pretty bad time. Pretty bad time. And a lot of racism during those years, too. You have to remember that after the fall of the Soviet Union, racism was legal once again, and there was, gangs and, fascist activity, etc. And so it wasn't a good time to be a black person in Russia in the 90s after the fall of the Soviet Union. So this guy, again, I think this guy, had genuinely believed in communism in the 1930s when he was a young man, and he lived all this time in the Soviet Union. Soviet Union fell, and he's black, and he's living in the Soviet Union, in the former Soviet Union, in Russia, and things are not going well. He wants to come back to the United States. He wants to get his American passport back. What does he do? He says, oh, I didn't want to be the mayor of this city. I didn't want to be on the city council. They tricked me. They forced me to, and it's bullshit, right? And people do these kinds of things, right? The two film directors described their abduction like a James Bond movie. Apparently, Pyongyang was so rich they could send secret agents to drug the two by their tees, and then Hollywood rescued them. Yeah, I don't buy it. I think they were given a job offer, and they worked for a few years running the film industry in North Korea, and then they defected. I don't buy it. I'm not convinced. People do crazy things under circumstances like this. Okay. All right. So those are all the Rumble rants. Okay. Jeff from Delaware and Laura from Houston are on. They are on the Rockfin. Shout out to both of you, Laura Baza from Houston, Texas, and Jeff from Delaware. Shout out to both of you. And now I'll start doing the super chats on YouTube. First one. You said in a previous stream that Michigan had a certain vibe to it. What do you mean by that? Also, I just joined CPI and I can't wait for Portland. Well, I'm really glad to hear that. Michigan does have a certain vibe. There's a certain kind of accent, while I'm talking like this. It's not completely a Wisconsin accent, but it's, there's a certain accent that rural folks in Michigan have. It's not full on Wisconsin or Minnesota, but it's not Ohio either. In Ohio, there's much more of an Appalachian influence, right? People, instead of saying 100, they say there's 100 of them. There's 100 of them. They don't talk that way in rural Michigan. There's not 100 of them. There's 100 of them. Yeah. I mean, I just last summer I went and visited a friend of mine who lives in Saginaw, Michigan. Older guy who was in the Workers' World Party when I was in it. And older guy who'd been arrested at peace demonstrations. It was great to see him. I've been out to Saginaw, Frankenmuth. Oh my goodness. I've been all over Michigan. I haven't been to the UP. I haven't been to the Upper Peninsula. So, I do apologize for that. That's one part of your state I haven't seen. But the summer of 2008, I went all over that state. Anywhere that Obama went, I went. Right? I went all over that state of Michigan, that great state of Michigan. I went everywhere. Went all over that state, and it was an interesting experience for sure. Right? Yeah. And very working class state. Farmers there too. Very working class. It's got its own vibe to it. Yeah. Its own vibe. Detroit is a different entity altogether, right? And most of Michigan wants to pretend that Detroit isn't a part of Michigan. And that's unfortunate. But, Detroit has its problems, etc. But Detroit is part of Michigan. And there's a divide. They talk about the 8th Mile Road. And yeah, I saw that when I was out there. And, I could tell you a million stories from when I was there. There was a big struggle in Michigan to get rid of the incinerator, that was kind of breathing smoke, polluted dust into certain neighborhoods. There was like a struggle to get rid of the polluting incinerator. Oh man, there's welfare rights organizers out there that are doing great work. And, there's much more of a union vibe, I will say, about Michigan. There's a working class union vibe because of the influence of the auto industry. Right? There's a lot more sympathy for labor unions in Michigan than in other parts of the country. And there's going to be a strike there very soon. And hopefully it appears that I will be posting the interview I did with a CPI member who's a Detroit auto worker. I'll be posting that very soon. So, shout out to you, Tom, if you're watching. I'll be posting our interview very soon. All right. All right. Great job on Lori Spencer's Twitter space yesterday. I really enjoyed that space. I love Nick Brana. Nick Brana is such a dedicated person, and I look to him for inspiration. I hope that I can lead CPI the way he's led the People's Party. It's a dynamic person. I had to give him a great shout out. And Lori is great too. I mean, she's organizing these RFK campaign related streams and bringing good people together. And yeah, Lori is doing great work. And there you go. Bradong, I think I answered that. I think I answered that for quite some time. In the stream there, I gave you quite a long answer about PSL. I might cut that. We will see. We will see. All righty. Everybody should celebrate my 59th birthday tomorrow. Happy birthday, John. Happy birthday. 59. Never would have guessed you were 59, John. Happy birthday. By going to the Portland Conference fundraising page, if they can't afford to click to donate, they should at least click the pray button. Well, there you go, John. Thank you for giving a great birthday gift, because the Portland Conference is going to be very, very important. And, we do need people to donate to make it happen. These things are difficult to fundraise for. So, we thank John for giving us a special appeal and, offering up his birthday for our Portland conference. That is a really meaningful thing. And I will drop the link to where we're doing the fundraiser. I'll drop that link right now. We have asked every member of CPI if they're able to do $10 a week, which is not much. If they could do $10 a week, then we would have more than enough to pay for the conference, So here's the link. It's Give, Send, Go. I'll drop the link in the chat. And, it's the Dare to Win conference. There we go. There we go. Give, Send, Go, Dare to Win. Let's see. Does it just go? Can I shorten it? Does it do Dare to Win? Yes. Give, Send, Go / Dare to Win. So I'll do a much simpler version of that. Here's a link that works just fine. Give, Send, Go / Dare to Win. Give, Send, Go / Dare to Win. And you can give us a nice donation to help our conference, to honor the birthday of our beloved member, John McCarthy, a very dedicated, loyal member of our group, who's done so much to support the Uhuru movement. Yeah, it's called Dare to Win, Beyond a World Beyond Imperialism. Here, we'll put the poster up on the screen. All right. It's going to be a great conference. I am so excited for our upcoming Portland conference. Right? It's going to be really dynamic. Dare to Win, a World Beyond Imperialism. And that's how you can support the conference. Go to Give, Send, Go, Dare to Win. We could use your support. We could absolutely use your support. Looks like I'll be in Portland this weekend for a movie screening. Fingers crossed. Still getting that finalized. All righty. They say that communism is a one-party state. Well, I mean, the Soviet Union originally was a three-party state. That there was the Bolsheviks, but then there was also the Left Menshevik Party, and there was the Left Socialist Revolutionary Party, and there were three parties originally. But everyone who was serious joined the Bolsheviks, and then there was violence and instability, and Lenin was shot, and there was chaos, and they eventually outlawed the other two parties, and they had one party, and then they outlawed factions within the one party. But many communist governments around the world have smaller parties that are represented. Many communist governments around the world have smaller parties in government. In China, the non-communist parties like the Peasants' Party and the left KMT party, they have some seats in the government, but generally. And the other thing that's interesting is in a lot of the countries like, North Korea, for example, right? And this is interesting. It's the Korean Workers' Party. It's not the Communist Party, because the Korean Workers' Party is a merger of three different parties. It's a merger of the Korean Communist Party, the Korean Christian Party, and the Korean Social Democratic Party. And they merged into one party after the defeat of Japan. They merged into a single party. They were originally 3 different parties. That's why it's the Korean Workers' Party. And in Germany, right, the ruling party in East Germany was called the Socialist Unity Party, because it included many different parties. So there you go. There you go. All right. They're all talking about Jimmy Dore, Cornel West debate. And I've talked about that. Cornel West certainly let us down. Kyle Kalinski's with Joy Gray. I haven't heard about Kyle Kalinski and Joy Gray. I guess I'm not paying attention. But yeah, Cornel West let us all down. But, he wouldn't be running at all if it wasn't for Nick Brana. Nick Brana is really responsible for Cornel West running. So there you go. There you go. And I mean, look, Cornel West, this is the problem. You can't think that Trumpers are the main danger and be revolutionary. Anyone who takes the position that Trump is a fascist, Trump is a Nazi, or Trump is the main danger, that is going to throw you off course to where you can't really fight the establishment. Doesn't mean you have to like Trump. Doesn't mean you have to support Trump. But if you say Trump is a fascist, you say Trump is the main danger, that throws you off into a camp where you're going to be aligned with the imperialists, because they think that too. The imperialists also think he's the main danger. And so if we're against the imperialists, we can't have the same position as them on who the main danger is. All righty. All righty. Okay. Today is also the 75th anniversary of the DPRK. Yes, they've been making great videos, having great ceremonies in North Korea to honor the 75th anniversary of their country. It was a government that was formed in the northern half of the Korean Peninsula. And the 14 points of unity. I can't read this enough. I've read this a few times on these streams, but I'll read it again because it's just so darn important. It's one of my favorite things to read you all. Hold on. Oh, boy. Hold on. Don't want my camera to fall over there. Okay. It's just, it's so important because I wish people could understand these things. I've got here the selected works of Kim Il-sung, right? And one of my favorite piece in here, my favorite piece by far in this book, I've even got it marked because it is my favorite piece of writing. This is the 20-point platform on which the government of North Korea was formed, right? This is the 20-point, it's called the 20-point platform. It's a radio speech by Kim Il-sung from 1946. Kim Il-sung got on the radio and he said, we're setting up a new government. The Japanese have been defeated. We're setting up a new government here in North Korea, and we've got 20 things that we agree on. Here's what they are. And I want to read them to you because they're not that radical. Often the demands that lead to the taking of power, that lead communists into taking office, are not that radical. This is the platform, right, that the North Korea was established on. That based on this platform, the people of North Korea accepted the rule of the Korean Workers' Party. This is the 20 points upon which North Korea was founded. 1, liquidate all remnants of Japanese imperialist rule. 2, wage an implacable struggle against reactionary and anti-democratic elements at home and ban the activities of fascist, anti-democratic political parties and organizations. 3, grant the entire people freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of assembly and freedom of religion. 4, see to it that the entire Korean people have the right and duty to form people's committees, administrative organs responsible for local affairs through universal, direct, and equal suffrage and secret ballot. 5, grant equal rights to all citizens in political and economic life, irrespective of sex, religion, and property. 7, abolish all laws and judicial organs that were in operation during the rule of Japanese imperialism and retain the after effects of people's democratic rights. 8, develop industry, agriculture, transport, and trade for the enhancement of the people's welfare. 9, nationalize big enterprises, transport services, banks, mines, and forests. 10, allow and encourage free activity in private handicrafts and trade. So support small businesses. 11, confiscate the land belonging to the Japanese state, the traders, and the landlords who continue to rent out their land, and abolish the tenant system and distribute among the peasants free of charge all the confiscated land. 12, fix market prices for living necessities to combat speculation and usury. 13, institute a system of uniform, equitable taxation and introduce a progressive income tax. 14, introduce an 8-hour working day in the factory and prohibit child labor of anyone under 13 years of age and a 6-hour working day for anyone 13 to 16 years old. 15, institute life insurance for factory workers and office workers. 16, introduce a universal system of education and widely increase primary and secondary school and colleges to be run by the state. 17, actively develop the national culture, science, arts, and increase the number of theaters, libraries, and radio broadcast stations and cinema houses. 18, set up special schools on a wide scale for the training of personnel required in state organs and all fields of national economy. 19, encourage scientists and artists in their work and give them assistance. And 20, increase the number of state-run hospitals and stamp out epidemics and provide free medical care to the poor. That was their platform. That was the platform on which North Korea was founded. And I have enjoyed reading that to people many times because there is many things in that platform that don't even seem that radical to us, right? It doesn't seem that radical. What, we're going to have public schools for everyone to go to. Oh, okay. All the people that were cooperating with Japan when we were being occupied and oppressed by Japan, kick them out of power and redistribute their land to us because they stole our land from us. Set up some hospitals, outlaw child labor, 8-hour workday in the factory. It's not that hard, right? It's not that radical stuff, but it enabled the Korean Workers' Party to take power because those were reforms the population overwhelmingly wanted. They wanted those things desperately, and only the communists could provide it. So there you go. All right. Human rights activists for the disappeared by the military dictatorship in Argentina also celebrated bin Laden for 9/11. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. The Palestinians didn't. That clip of the Palestinians dancing and celebrating was fake. Someone was throwing candy to the children, and the children were cheering that they got the candy, and they filmed it to show that they were cheering for 9/11. The Palestinians were not cheering for 9/11. That's a lie. That's been debunked. That whole video has been debunked. But it was spread all over U.S. media that Palestinians cheered for 9/11. That didn't happen. Did not happen. Yeah. So there you go. All righty. Bin Laden's death was probably faked in 2011. It is weird that they disposed of his body. And they said that was because of his religion, because there's nothing in Islam that says you dump bodies in the ocean. That was pretty weird. All right. And that there are a lot of details about that raid on bin Laden's home that have been debunked. They tried to make it sound like it was this big heroic battle. And then it turns out the people they killed were sleeping. You kill somebody when they're sleeping. They're like laying on the ground sleeping, and you walk in and, they're also saying they found porn at bin Laden's home, right? So he wasn't a real Muslim. I don't buy that. There's a lot of things about that are not true. And then one thing that they pointed out is the movie that they made, Zero Dark 30, that portrays the killing of bin Laden, made it look like they got the information about where to find bin Laden through torture. And they didn't. Right. And the CIA actually came out and they said, we didn't do that. Hollywood made that up. Well, that's horrifying. Why is Hollywood promoting torture? right? I mean, that's very disturbing when Hollywood says, you know, oh, we'll put in the movie that the way we got bin Laden was through torturing somebody. And the CIA comes out and says, no, not true. We did not torture anyone to get that information. That shows Hollywood was trying to promote torture. And that there's another weird thing in that movie, right? Which is that, and this is fascinating to me, right? Again, this shows you how weird things are, right? Hollywood movies, they're not accurate a lot of times, but you can tell a lot by there's a lot of subtly pushing agendas in Hollywood movies, right? There's a lot of subtly pushing agendas in Hollywood movies. One of the weird things in that movie is that there's a scene where they're in the CIA's headquarters in Langley, and they walk by some really important office, right? And there's a guy in the office, in the CIA office, praying. He's doing, what do they call it? Shalat, or, the Islamic prayer, and he's got like the call to prayer going, and he's doing the Islamic prayer. He's got his prayer mat out. And they walk by, and the guy's, doing his Islamic prayer, and that's showing that the CIA has Muslims in it. But what a lot of people speculate about, and this is very, very interesting, the head of the CIA under Obama, what was his name again? John Brennan, right? John Brennan had been the head of the CIA in Saudi Arabia for many years. He was the director of the CIA's Saudi operations, which he knew who Osama bin Laden was. I'll tell you that much. John Brennan, right, had been running the CIA in Saudi Arabia for many years. And John Brennan, when he was appointed head of the CIA, there were a number of people who came forward and said that John Brennan is a Muslim. Said he was a Muslim convert. He converted to Islam. And John Brennan never answered the question. Never said that wasn't true. People just said, well, that's crazy right-wing stuff. And look at him. He wears a suit and tie. He's an Irish American. He can't be a Muslim. But the truth is that John Brennan was the CIA director in Saudi Arabia for at least a decade. And on top of that, you beat me to the question. I'm going to get to it, Dustin. Calm down now. I'll get to that. And that John Brennan also he oversaw with Obama the recruiting of all kinds of Islamic extremists around the world to do the dirty work of the United States and Syria and Libya and other places. He lied about drone strikes before Congress. He testified before Congress about the drone program, and he said that they didn't have drone strikes in countries where they certainly were having drone strikes. And so he lied to Congress. And people said, well, that's his job. He's the CIA director, so it was okay to lie. It's a crime to lie to Congress. So people ask questions. Now, some people say, well, maybe he just pretended to convert to Islam to get into Mecca. And that's one theory, is that, only Muslims can go into Mecca, the holy city. And so maybe he pretended to become a Muslim so he could do spy work in Mecca and spy on people during the Hajj or something like that. I don't know. The other weird thing was that when he left office, when he quit the CIA, when he retired, he admitted that the first president he ever voted for was Gus Hall of the Communist Party. That the first presidential candidate he ever voted for was the Communist Party presidential candidate, Gus Hall. He admitted that, and that he voted for Gus Hall when he was a young man because he was mad at the establishment, and he saw Gus Hall, a communist, as being against the establishment. So in 1976, in the Carter election against Gerald Ford, he voted third party. He voted for Gus Hall. And he was afraid that they would somehow discover that in his lie detector test when he was becoming a CIA agent. Very strange story, right? The CIA are full of liberals, right? The CIA tends to be liberal. Now, there is a neocon faction in the CIA. The Bush family, Gina Haspel, Mike Pompeo. There's a certain conservative faction that has a lot of power in the CIA because they have the support of Republicans, they have the support of the military, etc. But the bulk of the CIA tend to be liberals, right? The CIA, MK Ultra, they're really into psychics, and they're really into drugs, and they're really into all kinds of things. I'll get to that. So they're really into all kinds of things. So there you go. All righty. So yeah, that whole thing is pretty weird, but some people think that guy praying is a hint from Hollywood that John Brennan is actually a Muslim or something like that. Brennan is a strange character. Adam Wayne says that my Bush impression is right on point, and I sound just like George W. Bush, Commander-in-Chief of America. I will defeat the terrorists and fight Al-Qaeda because I want to protect your freedom. I'm the freedom protector, the freedom decider. That's what I am. I'm George W. Bush. I love America. There we go. Thank you, Adam Wayne. PSL does not really care about black people. No, it doesn't, right? And I've seen this. I was in the Workers' World Party that PSL split from. It's condescending. They don't really respect black people. They see black people as victims, as perpetual victims. They tokenize black people, and there's a lot of that goes on, right? There's a lot of that goes on. I'm sure there's black people in PSL that believe, PSL is fighting for their rights as people, but, PSL, its program is, support Biden, basically defend Biden from Trump. Trump is the main danger, and that is a program that is not going to benefit the black community in any way. Thank you, Panos, for your super chat. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. What do you think about Erich Honecker? Well, he was the leader of East Germany when it was a socialist country. He carried out economic policies that, industrialized. He was anti-imperialist. He was more friendly to the LGBT community. East Germany was kind of the center of the gay rights movement. He was somewhat to the left of the Soviet Union. I don't quite know what more to say about him. Erich Honecker was, he was an important leader of, a communist country that was aligned with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. He was toppled in the Color Revolution. I don't know what more to say about it. All righty. Why is capitalism bad for your mental health? Well, one of the main factors in mental health is stress, right? When people are worried and have huge amounts of anxiety, it's not good for your mental health. And capitalism leads to a situation where many people are anxious about paying their bills, anxious about feeding their kids, anxious about their job security, anxious about getting through life. That's not good for your mental health. On top of that, capitalism encourages people to be distrustful of each other. It puts people into competition with one another. And it's bad for relationships, right? People are constantly judging other people, comparing themselves to other people. It alienates people. The product that you produce under capitalism doesn't go to benefit you or your community. And so anytime you're at work, you're just kind of renting yourself out to your employer. So the work you do doesn't reflect your personality in any way. You're alienated from your labor. There's many ways capitalism is bad for mental health. On top of that, Facebook and Twitter are designed to get people to fight with each other, to maximize engagement. The movies that are made and the media that's out there is all a cheap, sexual thrill, right? They're trying to get people to be, sexually stimulated or grossed out or whatever. It's kind of lowest common denominator stuff. And that is also not good for your mental health. And it creates a media culture that's not good for the population psychologically. So there you go. What's your favorite facts about Mexican independence. The Mexican Revolution that happened in the early 20th century is a very fascinating story. The Mexican Revolution, it wasn't a socialist revolution because it happened too early. If it happened a few years later, it would have been a socialist revolution. But the Mexican Revolution, Pancho Villa, and there was a lot of great stuff there. Now, Mexican independence, I think, what is that? We're talking about Santa. I don't know my Mexican history as well as I should, but is that Mexican independence, right? We're talking about, 1821. Wasn't there Santana, right? Santana, right? Right? Wasn't Santana? Is that what he was called? Yeah, Santana, right? Or Santa Anna, right? Yeah, he was the leader of the Mexican independence struggle. He was kind of a populist general. He was inspired by Napoleon, Simon Bolivar, right? He was kind of a key figure in Mexican history that many people look up to. I should know more Mexican history. Yeah, right. I was thinking of the Mexican Revolution, which was like a populist, nationalist uprising of farmers. But then there was, in the 1820s, you had the Mexican Revolution and Santa Anna. I wish I knew more about it. I should know more about these things. There you go. There's a film that was made that I really enjoyed. It was by Dalton Trumbo. Dalton Trumbo was a filmmaker who was blacklisted for being a communist. And he made a film that takes place in Mexico. It's called The Brave One. And it's about a boy who goes to rescue a bull. There's a bull that's been selected to be, in a bullfight. And this boy goes to rescue the bull from the bullfight. And it's a touching story about this little boy who loves this bull. But it also kind of brings with it the progressive history of the Mexican Revolution. And at one point he's in school and they're talking about Santa Anna, and the Mexican independence movement and its ties to Abraham Lincoln. And at another point, and it's full of talking points highlighting kind of the anti-imperialist and progressive side of the Mexican people and the Mexican Revolution, etc. And it's interesting because it's a Hollywood. It was a low budget Hollywood movie that Dalton Trumbo wrote from Mexico when he was blacklisted. I would recommend watching The Brave One, and it's a good film. And not the 2007 one, the one from 1956, The Brave One, right? And it won Best Screenwriter in Hollywood. And because Dalton Trumbo had written it under a fake name, he couldn't accept the award. I got it wrong. See, Santa Anna was before the revolution. I don't know my Mexican history. I apologize. I need to know my Mexican history better. I need to know it, right? I need to know my Mexican history. There you go. But I do recommend The Brave One. And that is a film that takes place in Mexico and has a lot of highlighting of the progressive history in it. There's a lot of like weird scenes. At one point the kid meets the Mexican president and talks to him. So I watched The Brave One all the way through and I really enjoyed it. But thank you for forgiving me, Gabby. I do apologize. I wish I knew my Mexican history better. Thank you. There we go. All righty. Can China be credited with rebuilding the strength of global communism since 1991? Kind of. China, by growing stronger as a country and maintaining its communism and emphasizing that it's a communist country. Yes, but China is not the Soviet Union. China's not funding communist parties around the world. There's no new communist international centered around China. So yes and no. Now, China helped, the Bolivarian countries develop, and it, with its investment, laid the basis for a lot of kind of independence struggles and mass popular movements to develop in a number of countries. But China's not spreading communism around the world. They decided in the early 80s to stop doing that. They made a decision in the early 80s that they would stop trying to build a new global communist movement. They take the position that class struggles outside of their country are not their business. That is their position. So, I mean, you could say that China, by being a communist country, by raising its people out of poverty, that helped communism. And you can also say that China's foreign investment and the Belt and Road and all of that, it created the process of strengthening kind of the national bourgeoisie and the domestic economies of a number of countries, pushing forward. Look what's happening in Africa now. This wave of nationalist liberation movements, Niger, Gabon, Mali, revolutionary anti-imperialist military governments are coming to power. That's because of China. If China's foreign investment wasn't there, that couldn't happen. Right. So you can credit China in that sense, but not in the sense of they're propagating communism or spreading communism around the world. They're not the Soviet Union. They're not doing that. And they made a decision not to do that. And in fact, the party that was the closest to China that followed, after the death of Mao, continued supporting China. It was called the Communist Party Marxist-Leninist. It had been called the October League. They actually dissolved in 1980 because China just said, look, we don't want you to do this anymore. We don't want there to be a U.S. party aligned with China. We just don't do that no more. Kind of fascinating, right? But, the Revolutionary Communist Party, Bob Avakian, they cut ties with China in 1976. After Mao died, they denounced, Deng Xiaoping. But there was this other communist party called the October League or the Communist Party Marxist-Leninist, right? I'll drop the WikiLeaks page. And they were very close to China. Their leader was a guy named Mike Klonsky. Mike Klonsky's father had been in the Communist Party USA. And Mike Klonsky, he was just this prominent communist new left guy. And he started the October League, and they were the China-aligned party. And I've met former members of the party, they just, by about 1980 or so, they just kind of dissolved, and they just kind of stopped existing because China basically said to them, we don't want you to exist anymore. What's left of them kind of merged into what's now called the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, but it's not the same people. These are different times. They were the China. They were like the official China-aligned party, the October League. And now Mike Klonsky, who was their leader, is now an educational scholar, and he's a prominent Democrat and Obama supporter. Have you seen the Jorge Ramos interview of Nicolas Maduro? Is that the one that everyone said was like a hit piece a couple of years ago? Is that the one, or is that a more recent one? Right? Let me look this up, because there was like a famous journalist, Jorge Ramos Maduro, right? Is that right? Yeah, that's the one where Maduro walked out of. That's famous. I remember when that happened, right? Yeah, that was like 4 years ago, and Maduro walked out of it, and he said, "This is an attack," and yeah, it was all staged, and it's mainstream media, just like they have English speaking mainstream media. They've also got Spanish speaking mainstream media. Remember when that happened, watching the clip and Jorge Ramos making a big deal. Oh my God, Maduro couldn't handle the truth. I was just, and it was all just, it was pretty clear. It was not a fair interview or conversation. So yeah. They've got U.S. imperialist propaganda in Spanish too, just like in English. So there you go. All righty, folks. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up here. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. Dare to struggle, dare to win.